Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the work session for the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, May 9, 2022. Ms. Elders, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Boland.
Here.
Councilmember Galani. Councilmember Hopper. Councilmember Jaxi.
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Edens.
Here. All the way from Oregon. Hello.
Councilmember Bros.
Here.
Councilmember Garitano.
Here.
Councilmember Flasher.
Here.
Councilmember Rambo.
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon. Here. Councilmember Farmer. Councilmember Nyan.
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni. Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Okay, thank you and welcome again. Under informational items, we have 12 other than our MoDOT representative, Mr. Piercy, and main agenda items. Is there anything of those 12 that any member of the council would like to discuss or about which you may have questions? Councilmember Jaxi.
Yeah, I read the update on the internet and I was just curious, when I saw it, it said June now for trucks rolling. Can we get just where are we at on that?
We can, Mr. Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you saw in my weekly report, there is the groundbreaking ceremony on May the 24th. The Director Vunich, Director Brown, and I went out and looked at the 16 locations where they will be putting their control boxes. These are large boxes, and so we needed to see where those would be. They tell me it will be 3 weeks before they have to order those boxes. Now, you just leave it at that. Don't and it'll be about 3 weeks for delivery of those, and then they'll start installing those boxes. Now, so they will be starting at the end of this month, early June, and actually that. Now, as I also mentioned in one of my previous reports, there is a 33-mile leg coming from Gray Summit to the western limits of the city of Wildwood. So they probably concurrent to the putting in the boxes could potentially start that process as well. So basically end of May, it might be early June, but that's the time frame right now.
Sorry. Did we see the initial design plan or whatever? I don't know that do we have an update on that?
Yes and no. Well, we went through that with them. There's one item, excuse me, there's one item, sorry. There is one item that we will need to come back to council for the additional homes that were requested to be included in this phase 1 of the project. That adds some additional funds that which will be over above the amount that we have in ARPA money available to us. So we will need to bring that to the council in terms of looking at those. But for the most part, it's the 2,025 homes that were identified. Most of the houses that came from all the resident feedback, all the council feedback, as I gathered that and provided that, all of those homes will be covered. So there's quite a few of them that'll be in the initial design, but there are some 200 homes roughly that are over and above what their plan is. And so we have a dollar amount for that again, we need to, they're working on some summarization, working through their attorney, and then we will be coming back to council.
So I had a discussion with both the city attorney and Steve about this a few weeks ago. So the project, as you know, started with the lion's share of the homes, and the 200 plus minus he's talking about will be added in. I think it's important to get this rolled out for our residents sooner rather than later. We're in warm weather. It's been plenty of time, in my opinion, to get the project going. And so we've been working with Spectrum to get a definitive date for announcing it and doing the shovel turn to kick it off. And that's May 24th. We're going to determine where and the time of day that happens. Nevertheless, this is not to say that the additional homes that have been discussed by the council and he's talking about will be presented for an additional allotment of money to get those done. This is simply to say we're going to move forward with what we started with and get it going sooner rather than later. So I think Councilmember Jaxi's question was in terms of the rollout plan for that large segment of this, so we can post it on our website, put it on our Facebook page, and our residents can know when they're going to likely get service. What is that date? That's the question, I think, right? So what is that date?
That date is going to be somewhere around the end of May, beginning of June. That is, we haven't, other than that, we just selected the end of last week, the actual date of the groundbreaking, the actual date of when they're going to start that is going to be determined when those boxes come in. And then exactly where they're going to start. I don't know exactly. I know they're coming, they're starting in the west and then going to be moving east, but I don't know exactly where yet. But I should know that soon.
And the reason they're starting west, just FYI, my understanding is because the cable that they're bringing in from Grace Summit, I believe.
That's correct. They have to bring a 33-mile line, a fiber line. from
So it
Grace
just
Summit.
makes sense. That's where they would start.
Right.
Okay. Anything further, Councilmember Jaxie? Councilmember Edens?
Okay, yes. So just a follow-up question. So it sounds like some of my residents that were on an additional list will probably need that second group of funding. But is there anybody that we can, that Don and I can communicate with and let them know they have or haven't been included in my ward without the additional funding measure? Did anybody make it in?
So
Or is Ward
Councilor-
2 in a hold?
So I would say sort of yes and no. I mean, I think that by tacit agreement, by everyone, I mean, at this bench is likely going to approve, I would expect, absent something I'm not aware of tonight, approve their inclusion, but that formal act of allocating the additional funds has not occurred. So I think that would be the answer. If it were me, I would give the resident.
Okay, because I mean, we are getting follow-up questions without hard answers, so.
Well,
Do
that's
we
the
have
hard
an,
answer.
right, do we have an estimated date on when we will be bringing up that next allocation, like within the next month, maybe?
I would
I mean,
expect within the next
quicker.
couple of months, the first thing, as I mentioned, is to get the program rolled out and started. I think the lion's share of the work to add those additional residents, my understanding from speaking with the city attorney and the city administrator, has been done. And so unless either of you have a different thought on this, I would say in the next couple of council meetings, it will probably be, and they're shaking their head, yes, it'll be before you for decision.
Okay, that would be excellent, especially because, I have some residents reporting that they've already seen charter trucks in the area, and I'm not sure if that's part of an initial evaluation or if they are anticipating they can start work quickly, because that area of the ward is closer to existing infrastructure. So if they're ready to start it because they've been seen in the area, then
I'm not aware of why they were there, but I would predict that probably didn't have much to do with this program. So.
Okay. All right. Well, the only other thing I had was just, I think it was just a typo on one of the WETF documents, just saying that I was responsible for providing some Ward 7 trustee information. And I just provided the Windcrest information in Ward 2, and that's already done. So I didn't know if somebody was supposed to provide Ward 7 and they should be notified instead. That's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Benich, I see you come on. Did you want to answer that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Edens, I'll address that. It appears to be an error, so we'll take care of it, and thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, is there any possibility that we can get a list of the homes that are going to receive internet access prior to the residents obtaining that and being posted, so that if we have any questions, we can get our questions answered before the residents start asking us additional questions?
Well, it's probably going to be a public document, so I don't know if that's possible. City Attorney Young.
We will review, as you may recall, the plan is a closed record. So we will review what we can share with, and we'll coordinate with Spectrum to get as much information made public as we can.
So I must have missed something, because I don't recall seeing this plan at all. I mean, I recall having a discussion about it, but I've never seen any details.
We haven't seen that yet.
When are we going to be able to see that?
That's the late May, early June. Last week of May, I think I heard the city administrator say.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. Councilor Garetano.
Yeah, my question was a follow-up to what Councilmember Edens brought up. So I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of any restrictions with ARPA money that, we have to use it by a certain date and whatever other requirements. So related to the question for those neighborhoods in Ward 8, 2, and 3, just making sure that we see that sooner than later.
City Attorney Young, any issue with the timeline on ARPA funds?
No, we are definitely well in advance of, we will have no problem with the timeline for the use of the ARPA funds.
Okay, it's 2026, the city administrator says, but we don't want to wait that long to.
I was
get our
going to say,
residents-
hopefully sooner than 2026.
Okay, anything
Thank you.
further? Any other questions under any informational items? Okay, also under information, we have Mr. Piercy, Ryan Piercy here for this evening. Mr. Piercy, would you like to come forward? So Mr. Piercy is the area engineer for MoDOT. And I want to thank you so much for being here with us this evening. I think is this your first time coming?
First
here?
time hanging out with y'all here on a work session.
On a
So
work session,
I know
all right,
I know I've
well.
come a few other times and I know we talk. And a lot of the times lately, like some of the others, it's been on the video and how everything's been going lately. So glad we got a chance to get in, see
Excellent.
faces here and start working out. Sorry, I know the past few times you guys invited me over, it's just been conflict with all our schedules trying to work out. So it was good. State holiday today, so obviously I'm free and I can come in and hang out with you guys today. So it worked out well. So I'll go through. I was kind of asked to come and kind of give a MoDOT report, basically just your guys' general area and some of the work that's coming up in our upcoming STIP. MoDOT puts out the STIP every year, stands for the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. It is the next 5 years worth of projects statewide that we are promising moving forward with. Normally about this time, we would have already put out a draft STIP and put it out for our commission. We held up on that because of the legislator. A lot of talks have been going on regarding repeal of the gas law and also gas tax holidays. So if you went out on the website right now, you would see it's a preliminary draft STIP that we put out there. We kind of use that as a tool to show our legislator kind of if they were moving forward with any sort of funding allocation or revoking some of those projects that we are currently promising, but wouldn't be able to deliver on in the future. So I think as of Friday, the General Assembly had kind of approved that. And I know they have till Friday to work out anything else they have going on. So we keep watching, but that was kind of the reason why if anybody kind of looks at the STIP and that future program and its normal timeline. So it'll be presented this month to our commission. It'll be open for comments and then it'll be approved and then we'll work forward. So if you open that up and you see what's going on, I'll tell you I'm just going to go through kind of a fiscal year starting and work down with regarding the projects that are coming on in all yours areas. MoDOT works on the fiscal year between July and June. So we're coming up at the end of fiscal year 22, coming up here in June. Some of the work that you may have been seeing going on right now, one of our alternative program delivery project managers has been working on a project. It's called a fixed price variable scope. It's kind of, we allocate the specific money to go out and they've been kind of doing crack filling on a number of different projects. And there's 3 different areas, but the one in your area is kind of the location on 141 between West Glen and 141, trying to keep that pavement kind of sealed until we can move on down the road. That's going to be one of the last areas of pavement near the end, maybe around 26 that we can get to. But that's work that's going on right now. That's one of the just preventative maintenance projects we have moving forward.
Where was that again? I'm sorry.
That one, there's 3 different areas, but the one in your guys' area is West Glen. It's Route 100 West Glen to 141. And then they're also working between 340. It's like I said, so this is kind of a new alternative delivery method for some of our projects, just kind of like our job order contracts that have allocated money. It goes until it ends. And then wherever we end, we pick up next year and it just keeps rolling down the line. So, but that was one of the ones that was put out there. So starting in fiscal year 23, a couple of the projects are going on right now. One of the ones that's been moving around So starting kind of just all the way north of your guys' boundaries, there's the 109 and Cc Roundabout. That's a CMAC project that we've been working forward. We got final design coming up. We've been working and having a few issues regarding some of the neighbors and just the right of way. There's some tough spots. There's some old septic tanks. There's a garage. We're continuously trying to just, our right of way is trying to work with that partner and try to get it going, make sure that they're happy, they're okay, and their resources are, we're equipping them and paying them a fair market price for what we're doing. But that is, that's a location that, a lot of people have asked. It gets bogged down, especially I think on Sundays when I'm coming from church heading down to Six Flags or any other time. And a lot of times some of the big bike races are going on and stuff like that too. You can get locked up on that interchange pretty well. So that roundabout's going to go good. It doesn't 100% function for warrant for a signal, but we did get CMAQ funds, congestion mitigation, air quality, and we've been actively designing that project there. From 109 to Long Road, Route CC is currently going to be resurfaced also in fiscal year 23. We wanted to do both those projects in combination. However, the issue with the roundabout, with the right of way, we're going to hold off and put that a little bit further down in the fiscal year. And we're still going to move forward with that Route CC pavement repair. If you guys drove it within the last year, you would have seen some of the new stretches of pavement that was done by our job order contracts to kind of keep the life in that pavement for a while to get going before we could get to this project that's coming up. The other one, and so fiscal year 23, and this one right now is tentatively scheduled around September 22. So lost my place. So we're resurfacing. So we're go a little bit further down. We're going to resurface. I'm sorry, I said September 22, November 22. Resurface 109. We're going to go from 100 all the way down to FF. And on top of that, if you guys have other things on that, that's a preventive maintenance asset management program, but we're going to resurface that entire portion of 109 all the way down to FF. I'm reaching out to other maintenance facilities and other issues around there, but that's another improvement project. Sporadically in there, we have a district-wide signal replacement project. And one of the signals I get in your guys' area is a signal at 109 in LaSalle School. So there's a couple other areas like Lemay Woods and other locations all throughout the St. Louis district, but that was one signal that was up for replacement, and that's in your guys' neck of the woods. That kind of goes in tandem with that. Continually going down, and this is getting a little out of your territory, but I know some of your people drive around here. So I-44, if anyone along those areas and had some other areas under Central that we're having a lot of pavement trouble with, we have a significant resurfacing of I-44 between Williams Road all the way to the Franklin County line in fiscal year 23-2. On top of that, we're going to be doing the North Outer Road or Fifth Street, however you want to call it, going in between 109 and Six Flags roads as well. On top of that, there'll be some additional barrier replacements and some of the fence and some of the other issues we get. We've been getting complaints that sometimes it's tough to negotiate. Did I run over? Was that the wrong? Okay. So didn't know if I said the wrong word. So yeah, we're going to keep that up. And one of the complaints we get around there is a lot of folks come on the outer roads and driving on 44 is the glare. So we're going to try to put up some sort of, we're going to take the just the fence that's kind of a barrier for the interstate out there. And we're also going to we're going to get some type of glare fence around there because people have said they have trouble navigating if it's an interstate vehicle moving or if it's on the outer road and they're making lefts and rights. So there's a portion of that between, I think it goes almost between Central and down to Workman. So, but that's a pretty significant pavement improvement project that we got going on in the fiscal year 23. So continuing on going into the next year. So while I already told you about the resurfacing on 109 between 100 and FF, then the next fiscal year, we're going to go to the north part. We're going to go 100 back up to CC. So that'll kind of complete that loop along that location. So we'll be moving along there. That will be in 24. Moving along the line too, I know you all have been working on, you guys have another roundabout coming up on the southern BA in fiscal year 25. We are going to resurface BA from north to south. So I'll be kind of continuously talking with you all and working on, I can't remember the timeline you guys have for your southern BA roundabout, but I know that we'll tie into it with a resurface. We're going to resurface that whole stretch down that line too. And then on top of that, after we get in, and something I know you guys, I know are talking about the cost share project today regarding the improvements that are coming on 100. So the way that kind of ties into what your cost share funds are coming in is in 25, we also have that portion of Route 100 between, it goes a little bit east of 109 all the way to Route 00 for a pavement resurfacing. And what we have talked about regarding some of your staff and how you guys been talking about the cost share and those safety improvements. And I know some are here to talk about the safety improvements here too. Is at the time, I'm hoping this is all supposed to be, scheduled in the preliminary STIP and coming in and coming up. Your timeline was construction in 25. Our timeline is construction in 25. At the time you were applying for cost share, I couldn't allocate and say that we are definitely, I could get this, I think currently right now we have it estimated about 9.1 million. I couldn't get it in at the end of the STIP due to the size of the improvement project. And so I couldn't promise that we could ourselves take it for a construction inspection, even though it's more of, it would be the preferred option. I know our inspectors, if we have a project or something along the same lines, we're going to want to work and not, cross butts with an additional inspector that's going to be out there. I know our inspectors are very good at what they do. And if we can take that work and combine it together, that's always been the plan. I know you all are going to talk about it this afternoon too. So, along with the improvements that you are all proposing in your cost shares for both of them, we were wanting to work that out to the timeline to where anything additional that's going to be added to the system, then our project comes through and it can almost kind of clean it up and make one nice, good section of pavement. So you're not seeing, if we came in and did it first and then you guys added on, there's going to be probably differentiating sections of pavement that might be confusing to some people. So, in a nutshell, that's kind of the plan that we've been trying to work all along when I couldn't get funds allocated to it. And I know you guys have been wondering when improvements were coming down the line, especially for Route 100. And we've always kind of had it conceptually estimated in 25.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, no problem. Moving down, but I've got that coordinated with both the left turns and the J turn options for the safety improvements along 100 that can go together. That's kind of, that's what you will see if you go out and look at the preliminary draft STIP. That's what you will see projected. And then if that is awarded by the commission, that is that's a stretch between what's going on currently and each fiscal year coming down the road that you're going to see improvements. That's what we are allocating. That's our asset management plan for your guys' roads in the upcoming STIP, just in general.
Thank you so much. I've got a couple of things I want to go over with them, but before I do, does any member of the council have any questions for Mr. Christie? Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, Councilor Garantano first.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I just have a request that I've heard from some folks that live off of 109 at Main Street right here. We have a roundabout that was recently installed, and I don't expect that you'll have an answer tonight, but it's more of a request for you to look into this. So the roundabout there heading southbound, we have 2 lanes on 109, and as they approach the roundabout, the rightmost lane continues on south towards Eureka. The left lane loops around the roundabout to take you into Main Street, or if you continue, you'll go to 109 North. The complaint that I get is that the people that travel on 109 South, as they come into the roundabout in the right lane heading towards Eureka, they do not yield when there is a car that's in the roundabout turning. And so there have been some close calls from a resident that has been contacting me, and she's expressed the interest of the neighborhood that there are these issues there for those folks. So if there's something you could do to provide greater awareness that that right lane still has to yield as it comes into the roundabout, that would be my ask.
There's a significant amount of standard signage that's already up, and specifically the people coming into that roundabout, there's a giant yield sign that says it right then and there. To prevent sign overload, there is enough of sign clutter. So I understand. I don't think anybody has not noticed that's sitting up on there that within the past year, the amount of aggressive driving on all our roads is pretty excessive and in my mind, ridiculous. So I understand concerns that are coming on, and I do know people, especially at the roundabouts, and I go into them all the time, and sometimes I think maybe I'm out of practice. I come down here all the time because I get the same complaints you guys are talking about. there's not a lot of an additional signage that we can put up along that roundabout that hasn't already been there. And the fact of the matter is people are not stopping. It is clearly people driving very aggressively. They don't want to yield. They don't want to stop. They just want to blow through. The geometrics, the signage, everything on those roundabouts and the other ones that are coming up are absolutely to federal standards. And if it is something where people are not yielding and not following standard rules of the road as they're supposed to, it's something that law enforcement's going to get out there and need to watch them and enact something like that. There's nothing additional. I can't put a bump up. I can't, and there's really no additional signage I could throw out there to let people know.
Given that, I would suggest we just let the captain know about it and let him make a judgment as to what he may want to do.
Exactly, yeah, and that's why I didn't even mention signs, because it's probably our only roundabout where we have 2 lanes going to 1, so I don't know if it's just people not realizing that, but
I know it's definitely something I ask when additional roundabouts, and I know you guys are driving yours and we have ours, is while the geometrics may be standard for a roundabout and they completely meet federal guidelines, I'm getting a little bit more well-versed in these too. They're becoming a standard norm. I don't think they're going anywhere. They're going to be used in many places throughout. It's something new. And if you need something more fun, head up to Kansas City, go to our Diverge About. and won some innovation awards, but it's quite fun if you know how to do it. But, I do ask, trying to fit these within the right of way that we have, or if we need some more, I am trying to push the geometrics that physically, the idea is these are supposed to slow people down to create the gaps that can't be developed because a signal isn't going to be warranted in the location. And there's going to be times you need to wait. I think people have this idea they don't have to wait at a roundabout. And the idea is it may be justifiable between, times where a signal, there may be a couple warrants for a signal may be met. You're going to sit there and you're going to have to wait almost the same cycle as a signal. There's going to be those locations where the roundabout functions that way.
So the bottom line is you got signs there and you're good with it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilor McCutcheon.
Yeah, on the same subject, but I think you might have answered one of my questions. I'm getting a lot of complaints about sign overload on roundabouts. So if it's the federal standards, that means nothing can be removed. All the signs that are there are going to have to stay there.
If there's specific signs, you have something. I specifically get quite a few sign requests kind of along that go with the same type of request. Like, I'm not quite understanding what I'm supposed to do. I'm not looking at the pavement markings that clearly show there's a roundabout and you go straight, you go there, you yield here. Obviously people can get confused. It's the last thing I want to do for people driving through a roundabout. If people could just kind of slow down and take a moment, it would be great. If there's a specific sign you want me to look at, I've looked at these roundabouts. I have the plans that were done by HR Green. Everything has been done to our NUTCD standards. There's nothing more to add or take away.
So if you can email the city administrator your specific resident concern, he can then transmit it to Mr. Piercy.
That'd be fine.
Okay, and I have one more question. We're scheduled to get a new sign for Pond Grover Parkway, and it's not been placed yet. Do you have any idea when that will be?
So I'm pretty sure that agreement was signed and it went in and it's waiting. What has been going on within the last couple months is we have been on a sign hiatus of ordering because we had too much of a backload that we didn't have enough maintenance resources to install them. So I haven't been able to put in a work request for 2 or 3 months until the signing and striping team. And we've been pushing our maintenance facilities to take some of their responsibilities.
When it might be installed.
So who here would have signed the traffic, or I can't remember, it might have been TR 42 or something. Who would have signed the traffic agreement with the pool engineer? Because I thought that had been
Rick
signed.
Did you hear the question?
Yes, just to clarify, Ryan, the agreement was signed some months ago and we actually had to pay like $500 or something to get the sign changes done by MoDOT. So we've been patiently waiting to get that done. I trying to remember the name of the traffic engineer that I've been emailing back and forth. His name is escaping me at the very moment, but
I think you were working with Todd.
Could be. I could certainly follow up tomorrow, and if we could shake it loose, it would be great.
I have quite a few pool engineers working at the
So if
TMC,
you
so
could work,
I'll look it up.
since you obviously don't know and Rick doesn't know at this point, not to belabor it, if you two could get that determined and email Councilor McCutcheon and Councilor Bertolino and or the city administrator.
Yeah,
And then
easy
he'll
enough.
email it to them. And does any other member of the council want to be in on that? No? Okay, just to those two then, Steve,
Works.
if you could do that.
Thank you.
Everyone good? All right. Councilor Bertolino.
Quickly, Ryan, you mentioned work on Route CC, which is Wild Horse Creek Road, resurfacing. Will that include a widening of the shoulders on that highway?
No, we're existing in there as of right now. So that's just going to be a preventative maintenance, kind of an asset management project. There's a little bit of ADA work at a couple of signals, like at the school and Edison. Other than that, and then I've been working with your counterparts up there in Chesterfield. I know there's a few other developments coming in along that area too regarding, the only ADA work I have is at those signals. I don't have any expansion program, but I've been trying to work with the communities coming in to keep that up. But Wild Horse Creek, there's no expansion project for doing that unless it's a little bit wider where it's leading into that roundabout. But then after you hit those limits, that pavement's, I think, rolling 20 years old, and it's got some old, pretty stout Missouri River gravel that's been holding it up, but it's losing its integrity. So we need to get out there.
So if I could follow up on that question, we had some significant debate relative to the viability of the Monarch Fire Protection location that they have proposed on Wild Horse Creek Road. And one of the concerns is exactly that. In the, for example, in an extreme case in terms of rush hour, particularly in the evening, with no place for people to go when fire trucks pull out, that's just been our concern, in terms of being able to pull off the road. So I guess just largely, and I just ask this as a yes or no question, if we can, is MoDOT okay with, I'm not familiar with all the analysis, if any, that you've done relative to that proposed location, but with in and outs and emergency procedures and how this is going to really work, is MoDOT okay with that?
We don't look into the response time regarding the
I'm not talking
truck.
about response time.
Yeah.
I'm talking about where people are going to go when the trucks come flying.
I mean, there's going to be a couple foot of shoulder. I know that you guys have been talking with the fire department regarding when they hit the lights and coming out, people getting over and moving little by little, whether they're going to cut through one of the other properties or not. Our review of the process, it's a permit where they're building, and the only concern, the only skin in the game I have is their access to Wild Horse Creek. Response time for service customers coming down here with you guys, if they're going to be able to make it through that delay, that is not part of our review process. We do not address that. We don't do that on any other fire department buildings
Okay.
going anywhere.
Fair enough. Councilor Clark, I'm sorry, anything else, Councilor Bertolini? Councilor Clark.
I have two quick questions. There previously, before some road work was done on Highway 100 at Mueller Road, there was a right turn going west that after the repairs were made, the painting for the right turn disappeared. And as I understand, there was a traffic, some kind of a traffic study done that showed that it wasn't needed in that area right away. However, that study probably didn't address the time of day and the days that is needed. It's needed at the church that's right there at that location. When they let out and people come in, that's when the traffic is the worst and they need direction out there. So can you push that along to just get it restriped so that there's where the previous right turn was, it's back?
So I don't know what the history was for what was done back in 06 when I wasn't around, or what the decisions were made. I do notice that back then it was resurfaced and the channelized islands were taken out. I have pretty much tried to pull the weeds with anybody. Nobody still works at MoDOT that was around at the time too. I've been trying to dig up as much history as I can regarding reasoning. I just haven't been able to look it up. The way the place sits now and the way the rumbles are simply blowing the striping out, there's not enough room. And the way, based on previous overlays, you're going to need to add pavement to get an adequate striping there. There wasn't a traffic study done. I had the traffic team look in to see what the right turning movements at more peak hours were. I understand that at a church service, special events along that nature, that's not going to be incorporated. We're going to look at the peak hour times and how many rights are going into it. And that's what wasn't meeting warrants at this time. I have said that I do know we can move forward with, obviously we have the large 25 project. I know it's down the road and it's going to be some time, but at this time, I don't have any way to add pavement or do anything there. What was done prior, why it was taken away, I can't give you an answer just because it wasn't a process I was involved in. I have tried to get you the history to look into possibly the reason why it happened in 06. But we're so many years later and it's being requested now. All I can do is currently right now, I know it's not meeting the warrants. I don't have any project I can sit there and program in. I'm not comfortable with going out there and blasting the pavement as there's already concerns out there and there's not enough of a width. It's a very tight, you need at least a couple foot on there. So pavement's going to need to be added on top of what's already there, but just simply blasting the striping, removing the rumbles and moving it the way it's configured and the way the overlays have come, it's just at an awkward space. And best I can do right now is have it incorporated to be reestablished in a future job when I'm going to have a fresh coat of pavement over and I can address it right then and there when it gets restriped.
Well, I would appreciate it if you would put it on a project in the, as quickly as possible,
Yeah.
because for that time of day, it is an issue. And we have to have someone out there directing traffic. The second question is,
When you say you're having someone directing traffic during Sunday, do you have is it a congregation, like a member of the congregation standing out on 100?
what I was told, I'm not a part of that congregation,
Okay.
and it's, I don't know who is telling them to go out there and do it. I have seen in the past the police department out
Okay.
there directing.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's all the time. I don't know.
I get it.
I've seen them.
My church does the same thing. So,
Okay.
but we have off-duty officers doing it. I'd be more concerned if it was
That's another.
somebody
that's
standard.
another
I mean,
discussion
yeah, that's
for
fine.
you.
I
So-
wanted to know because if I don't know what's going on there on the roadway. So
Councilor Clark, go ahead for a second.
Yes, my second question is at the proposed roundabout at 109 and Wild Horse Creek Road, I've noticed on the drawings that there's no crosswalks, and I realize there's no sidewalks at that area, but there's many people who ride their bikes back and forth across there and maybe want to cross. And it would be, I would think, very dangerous for them to cross that roundabout without some kind of crosswalk. So if you could look into that, I would appreciate it.
109 and Wild Horse Creek will remain a share the road facility, but I won't be able to add bike only lanes simply for a small segment too. Then they would be weaving in and out of an bike only traffic, and then it'd go right back into 109 and CC traffic. So the crosswalks or sidewalks, like I said, I don't have any programmed ADA or any sidewalk along that nature. It's not an ADA transition route and hasn't been designed of that nature. It would take an expansion of the system, which we aren't doing right now. So, I mean, like a lot of our other roads, I get the same question. All our major routes, Lindbergh, everywhere, I get the same thing. And as of right now, MoDOT's number 2 priority is our ADA transition plan. That is fixing what is on our system right now, make it federally compliant. We have a due date for 2027 with the Federal Highway Administration, where we had promised that work is going through. And while we do a majority of those projects, we do try to span gaps if possible, but it is not an ADA expansion project. So if a facility is share the road, it will stay share the road.
So the short answer is no.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah.
Councilmember Vaughn.
I just didn't know if we had an update on the Truman Road situation since 2 of the 3 parties are in the room.
We are waiting to hear from Ellisville, which should happen any moment. The answer is no until we do.
All right. Well, and then the other thing was, if you're putting a plan together it doesn't need to be changed. I think the signal works fine. It's just the timing is off at Westland Farms and Manchester, and then moving up to Pierside, which is just like, I don't know, half a car length, it seems, up the road. The timing gets off all the time. So people get hung up in one place or the other. And then the timing in general on Westland Farms, I think it runs at 3 minutes, which is like an eternity when you are sitting there.
So it's the side roads that are having the issue.
So like the crossroad, like just the general timing, I think, of like when something turns green and red between the light at Pierside and I guess it would be Old Manchester,
Mhm.
and then Westland Farms and 100 is just off. in
Okay.
general, like how they work together, but then the timing specific to the West Glen Farms, Manchester Road light is like an eternity in
Okay.
both directions.
All right, I can send that to traffic for observation.
And you might work with Rick Brown on that as well, given that we've got a Manchester component to
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
So, an old Manchester component.
Okay.
All right.
Just
Councilmember Garrett.
I would remind everybody that every signal has a finite amount of green time.
We
It's just what you got to remember. So I mean,
Yeah.
there's, I mean, you add 10 seconds one way, I'm taking 10 seconds from another. So it's a very fun balancing act. It's
Yeah.
not, there's not an infinite amount of time.
I think
on
the
any
big thing
signal.
is when you
But
are
I'll try to
sitting so
optimize
long
the
at
two.
one
Yeah,
and
some
then you
type of
immediately run
optimization.
into another one
I
and then
get
it
it.
backs through the intersection.
Yep, I'll get it. So
Councilor
I'll see what
Garrett.
we can do.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Councilor Garrett.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to what Councilmember Clark mentioned at Mueller and 100. You mentioned the church, but there's also, keep in mind, there's a school there
Mhm.
that has some of the same issues that Councilmember Clark mentioned. So again, that right turn lane or something that would solve that would be great because that traffic comes up right behind you when you're on 100.
So I think you did say you can put that on the list. It may not happen immediately, but you're going to put that on the list, hopefully with resurfacing.
I was hoping to do that in the 2025 job. It's just a matter of adding pavement and working it out and restriping. So it's very awkwardly, it's down. I mean, if you look at the shoulder, it's a minimum.
Yeah,
So if I
no,
blast that pavement, then then people are going to be veering in and out, back and forth. It's going to create a weave that I'm not comfortable with doing at this moment. So.
Fair enough. And then I didn't get a chance, but thank you for coming tonight and
Oh,
for
no, thank you
working with
guys.
us. And just one compliment. For the first time and probably ever, I drove on 100 Manchester Road heading east and had green lights all the way from Wildwood past 141. That was like, I should have bought a lotto ticket that day.
Yeah,
I would
so
So whatever you did, keep doing that.
we have a number of
Manchester,
optimization
from
projects
here, I
all
would
over
agree
the
with you,
district.
And I travel that every day now.
Yeah.
It moves very well. And for
Yeah.
all that you have going on in all directions and the volume of traffic, the person who designed that should get kudos.
And traffic's been pumping a lot of optimization plans right now. So.
Okay,
yeah.
so now let's go negative again. So I think we wrapped up all the council members, so I'm going to save mine to last year. So I've sent an email to you about a segment of road in our city, which is Highway 100 west of Highway T to the Franklin County line. Okay.
Mhm.
And I think that you said earlier that's in 2025
Mhm.
allotment. Okay. Well, I just got a couple of questions for you, and I got some photos I want to show you and everyone else here. So my understanding is that segment of road was built in early 80s. Is that correct?
I'd have to look. Yeah,
think
I don't
that-
know
think
the
that's
age.
right.
Yeah.
And my
Sure.
further understanding is that it has never been resurfaced. And so we've got decades.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, the question I have for you, so that road, as you probably know, is the only way in and out of the city of St. Louis without going over a bridge. And when we had flooding issues a few years ago, we had a lot of traffic on it.
Yeah, we used 109 and we used 100 as a bypass. I remember.
Exactly. And so do you know the volume of traffic on that segment of road? Seems like a lot. And I'm
I
just
would
wondering-
take whatever we diverted off of 44 and it probably was on 100. So,
I'm sorry.
I mean, we were diverting traffic from
No,
44.
I'm not
correctly.
talking then. I'm saying just today.
I can look up to see what the daily traffic
Well,
is
I'm
for
going to
that one.
submit to you, it's a lot.
Mhm.
Okay. And now I'm going to show you what this road looks like after nearly 50 years of nothing really happening in terms of resurfacing, at least. So can we just roll with this? So this is the first. And I'll just say this anecdotally. Well, you can go to the next one. That's all right. I think they're the same. So anecdotally, I travel several roads throughout the state in the four corners of it. And I don't have the statistics to back up this next statement, but I will say anecdotally, of all the places in the entire state of Missouri that I go, that I believe, just in terms of kind of ballparking it, have as much traffic or more as this. This is by far the worst in the state. And I don't know how it got here, but what you're going to see here in a second is going to show you, and the last one's going to show you some major safety issues, but go ahead. So we're just going to kind of run through these real quickly. Okay, kind of a close up.
Mhm.
Go ahead, next. This is the entire segment of that road. It's this kind of stuff. Okay, next. Next. And this. And that. And this one ties into, I think this one ties into the, keep going, the next one. Go ahead, Travis, that one. And then the last one, I think we got. So I took these on Sunday, yesterday. And this photo actually doesn't do justice to what this is, but that prior hole in the road, one of several, has now generated these rather large rocks. And the one closest to the bottom of the screen is about 6 to 8 inches in diameter. That fortunately, somebody didn't get in their windshield or on their car as large trucks that travel that road every day ran through that thing. So I'm just going to ask you, I know we've heard a lot of notes tonight, and I hope you can do something about it. This can't wait to 2025, Ryan. So when do you think you could take a look at that and let us know if you can maybe move that up?
That is programmed in 25.
I understand it's programmed in 25. My
I
question
I
is,
can't bump a $10 million project any earlier on in the STIP. This first 2 years, the STIP already 100% programmed. This hasn't even been touched as a resource.
so what
on a
are you going to
design
do to
schedule.
protect people in the interim?
If you and everybody on the board can send anything that you have through our call report system, if you see an issue, it goes right to the maintenance facility building that needs to go. You can send something to me, but it's going to be word of mouth. It's going to go me to the superintendent, to the building supervisor, to
Ryan,
one of those.
respectfully, we don't have the time to spend all day at the computer to send you an email on everything on this section of road from that. I mean, I've told you about the problem. You already probably know it.
I already know,
So
and I know
I
our
would ask
resources
that
tell me the
somebody
same
please
thing.
Go out and look at it, document it yourself. I mean, I don't think it's reasonable to expect us to send an email to your reporting system, every pothole and rock that's going to harm somebody on this road.
The
Respectful.
maintenance facility, they go out and they do pothole runs all the time, but it unravels and I can't keep track of every square mile, every square inch in the overlay. If you guys have an issue, if you guys have a concern, the fastest way to get it put into our system and makes a physical report in our system is to utilize the call report database. It'll go in there, it'll log, you'll get a number, and then you'll get something when it comes through and it's been taken care of.
Okay, so you want us to log that entire section of road as a complaint? Because I mean, that's the issue.
If you want to, that's fine. If you want to be more specific, it'll help pinpoint the better accuracy to help a maintenance crew get out there and mobilize and get out there to do it. If you want to just say there's potholes from A to Z, they'll get out there and they'll do their normal run when they're trying to get out there and do any sort of pavement repairs. I hear the same thing from the folks that run 100 work out of the Eureka building, and I know the shoulders unraveling. They're getting tired of getting out there and band-aiding. They're asking me the same thing you guys are asking me about. When can I get out there? When the 100 will be resurfaced, and the reason why it's such a big project is the shoulders are being rebuilt too. So part of what we're doing out there is I'm not just putting a fresh coat of pavement underneath all of 100.
Yeah.
Part of that is the shoulder replacement and reconstruction, which is why it's such a substantially expensive
I
project.
get that, but how this road got to this point is beyond reason. I mean, respectfully. So
Okay.
let me ask you a question back to 2025. So I've heard you say, you can't move it, can't move it. I mean, things have been moved before. There have been projects that MoDOT has moved from 2024 to 25 to 26, maybe in reverse order. Is that not correct? That's happened from time to time?
Projects can
Okay.
move when it arises. Yes.
Okay, so then what would be the process to move this up? They get moved, so what would be the process?
There would need to be a gap that would be bigger, and we would need to have a resource that can design it, whether we do it in-house or we do it out-of-house, whether we get the project manager can take it and work on it.
There's something that can be done relative to moving it as to input we can give you, assistance, whatever. Is there anything, I mean, could you work with them on that?
So you would prefer it to be rebuilt earlier, and then your cost share projects come in and there'll be different pavement
Cost share
markings that
projects in a different part of this. I'm only talking from Highway T to the Franklin County line.
well, T is there, and there's the left turn lanes too that are.
Where it
going
turns
to be
into two
expanded.
lanes.
There are left turn lanes between that entire section, not to mention the two J turns. So you are expanding at 4 different left turn lanes and the 2 J turns, and that's going to come after this.
So if
So
that ends up
it's-
being an issue, then just start it as far down Highway 100 when you get past those, so it doesn't interrupt them. There's a lot of road between there and Franklin County line.
Mhm.
So my question is, could you work with Rick and see if we can move this up any?
I'm not very confident that that's going to work out with the resources that we have today. No, I can talk. I will continue working. I understand your guys' concerns. Our system, our resources, what I have right now, what I have to do, the amount of consultant contracts that I have, I don't have the resources in my in-house or out of house to
Yeah.
push it forward,
I
not
hear
to
you.
mention push it out. If something big would push out of 24 where it was a gap and we thought we could have a process to go through, I can have this at the top of my list. But I'm not going to move forward right now and promise anybody here that I'm going to bump it up a year when I have no confidence that it can be done. We have worked very hard with all our planners and asset management to push a new STIP program where the pavement needs are between preventative maintenance, asset management, and ADA transition. So this is what we have moving forward for the next 5 years. This is what we are working with our in-house designers, project managers, and construction inspectors. It isn't just, it's all resources. It's resources to design, it's resources to inspect, and it's resources to maintain.
It's a lot worse than some of the ones you talked with us about tonight, though.
Okay.
Respectfully. Okay, anything further for Mr. Piercy? Councilmember Cutchin.
So we were talking about funding. Is the state receiving any federal dollars for infrastructure? Does any of
Are you
that
talking about
come
the new,
over?
are you talking about the new FAST Act or IDJA or, whatever the new, yeah, I mean, part of that is, part of our budget is federal dollars. We get the same 80-20 split. So there's, the district funds and the federal dollars that matches how we program our STIP just as much. So, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about relief funds or you guys were talking about the other funds on that, I mean, I'm not really privy. I'm not in the rooms talking about how those relief allocation funds are there. I know what we have as a St. Louis district, not just Southwest St. Louis, but all five of the area teams, how we work together, how we program throughout. We're also run by East West Gateway, which you all work with, which is our metropolitan planning organization that makes sure the money that we are allocating throughout the entire district is spread equally and throughout, and we're satisfying our goals regarding keeping a specific amount of interstate primary and secondary routes in a specific condition. I realize that you guys are in an area where there's one roadway that is not to those abilities, and you want to see it improved. I have worked with conceptual estimation and with our planning partners and pushing this into the budget that we have right now. And where that big amount of money can fit is in that allocation project that I have in 25. Progress is never quick enough for anybody. I understand that 100%. All the ADA transition plans that I have throughout my entire area right now on all different rounds, people want it now. And I can't give it to them now. So, I mean,
question is
the growing
federal
pains are
funding.
coming.
Do you have any, what was your question specifically? Ken?
Are you receiving any of the federal funding in infrastructure funds that maybe could be utilized for the road through up from T to Jefferson or Franklin County?
Yeah, the 20 will be the district funds that we have that's connected to gas tax. And then the other 80 is going to be, we get the federal match. That's how we program all our
So
projects.
you programmed that though before the gas tax passed, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, so now the gas tax is passed. If it doesn't get repealed, that doesn't change it,
it shouldn't. I should be able to keep it where it's at.
moving it forward.
I don't
Since
have
you
the,
more money.
like I told you, it's not just a matter, money doesn't solve all problems. I don't know why people think money solves all problems. It doesn't. The funding resource and the gas tax was the first good domino to fall, which I am very happy that we can. And the next step that's being programmed is the largest step that we've had in a decade. There's a lot of projects coming. What I'm worried about is the resources that we have to deliver that. And that's what I've constantly talked to, and our legislators and those you work with too. It's not just having the money to do everything. You can't just funnel money into the system. It has to be programmed, it has to be allocated. Projects have to be planned, estimated, designed, constructed, and maintained. And we don't have all those tools right now. So just pushing a project, I can't tell you I'm going to do it next year because I don't have a designer that can do, I don't have a resource to design that with the other projects that are coming up in the STIP.
Okay.
So
Any other questions for Mr. Councilman Clark?
So are you saying that and all of the projects you have going on roadways, such as the mayor was talking about, are all in a need more than our road. And so they have to be worked on, because I've just been driving back and forth from here to West Plains to Springfield, and I've seen a lot of roads that are being worked on that aren't near as bad as
Bingo.
what we have.
Bingo.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm talking what I have in the Southwest District. If you're going to Springfield, you're going to other districts. They don't have the same problems we do. They don't have the number of lane miles that we do. I continuously work with our planning department and our asset managers to deliver the projects within the area where the needs are. Our top two priorities have been asset management and ADA transition. Other locations along 100 going all the way down to Big Bend, though that roadway needed to get hit more, not to mention it had the ADA facets. We have that portion of 100 divided in 5 different segments. We have 3 other projects that needed to be awarded earlier on between Big Bend and 67, 67, 140, and 270, and 270 and 141. I have continuously moved resources along the lines to design those projects and implement them. 100 is already going on right now. The second one's going to be awarded at the end. The third is going to be done in 24. Your project will be in 25, and then we'll work on the remaining from West Glen to 141 after that.
Any other questions for Mr. Pearson? All right, thank you so much for being here.
All right, thanks, guys.
Next on the agenda, Mr. Silverman. We got about 4 minutes left here. Maybe we can we'll run through it. Yeah, run through it so you don't have to come back after the main meeting. Enlighten us on things going on in Jefferson City.
Thank you very much. We are in the last week of session, so we're almost done. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm going to go really quickly. I have 4 minutes. With regards to ARPA funding and the budget for watershed erosion projects, the House just passed the Senate version, which was a total of a little over $4 million, $411 million, basically, for water infrastructure projects. It will be through a grant process. I know that there was kind of questions on whether we would get a line item. There was not one city or county that I believe got a line item for water infrastructure projects. That does not mean next year that won't be something that comes out. We will have a new appropriations chair in the Senate. So that definitely could change. The good news is it is not a one-to-one match. So the Senate version, there is a match requirement, but it is not a one-to-one match. So if the city brings in 200,000, it doesn't necessarily mean they're only stuck at 200,000. It could be more than that. So, and I believe that is going to be determined by DNR when the application process comes out. Had some conversations with BJ Tanksley about broadband expansion. I had those conversations with Steve and John just to answer some questions on what the reimbursement would look like for the process and the contract that has already been done with Charter. I think you guys probably got the questions that you needed answered, but if there's anything that, any other questions that you need, please feel free to reach out. I'm on a constant, conversation with BJ. I see him in the Capitol all the time. So there was a lot of questions with regards to the grant process, the timeline, and some other details about what has already been worked on and what needs to be continued to be worked on. I'm trying to go as fast as possible, so just let me know if I need to speed up. The small business bills, we are kind of, we only got 4 days left. Senate Bill 809. It's still stuck in the Senate. That is the one by Senator Koenig. It is 11th on the formal perfection calendar. That means it would still need to go over to the House with 4 days left. The chances of that are very unlikely. The one that kind of has, I guess you could say, legs would be House Bill 2593. That is in the Senate as now. It is 8th on the House bills for third reading, which basically means that once you get past third reading, it would be passed. But like I said, it's 18th on the list, and that's on the formal. So they go in order with the way the Senate's moving. It doesn't seem like that's going to be a major priority, but I will consistently watch it. I've been working hand in hand with Missouri Municipal League to make sure that we are kind of, I guess, the shield to make sure that nothing gets past us. So that's pretty much it for those. Broadband, there's a bill, Senate Bill 820. Councilmember Garitano brought something up at the last meeting with regards to what the level the city would need to, how broadband grants would be given out from EcoDevo. Representative Lewis Riggs tried to add a requirement of the federal guidelines that would basically make it so 25 megabits per hour would be the guideline of how, what cities received any sort of broadband infrastructure. That was thrown into Senate Bill 820. I did discuss with Senator Burleson, who is the sponsor of that Senate bill. I discussed with him, and they stripped out that language. So that language is now only related to solar. So nothing that Representative Riggs had in that bill is going to be moving further, at least for this session. I will make sure. There was 17 groups that did not approve of it, including the Missouri Municipal League. I voiced my opinion, and then the broadband companies as well have also voiced their opinion. So I don't see it as having any legs this session, and probably not next session unless other groups are brought to the table. I talked about the drone language a little bit earlier in the early in session. I did talk with the representative that actually sponsored that legislation. I told him I'd like to see the municipalities kind of left out of this. It was more meant to be a crime bill than anything. And I said, with everything that's going on with watershed and the erosion process, there's a possibility that the city might need to use drones, and it's going to be a very tough process to go house to house and seek, approval that you can use a drone near their home, especially with those creeks backing up to the backyards of those houses. And then lastly, with regards to the gas tax, I really wouldn't worry too much about it. Representative Walsh has proposed not only the gas tax, which went nowhere, but the gas tax holiday, which also was voted down in the House. So the $500 million that is going to MoDOT, well, expected to go to MoDOT from the gas tax is safe to stay this session, at least. So, and then I can try and figure out, I believe it was Councilmember McCutcheon, you were talking about the ARPA funding. I can look throughout the House Bill 3020, which is where all the ARPA funding is, to see if there's any additional money that MoDOT received. I can look that up probably by tonight and hopefully get it to Steve by the end of the night. Yeah. Did I get done 4 minutes?
No, but that's okay. So relative to the money for watershed, Jake, what's the bottom line in terms of where you think that's going to come from at this point?
I'm sorry.
The money for watershed. What's your best guess as to where at this point so we didn't get the line item. So where
Correct.
is that going to? Is it going to be an MDNR grant application? Probably. What's the bottom line?
Yeah, exactly. So it will be a grant application through DNR. They're going to bring in some people that are, they have a grading scale, a guideline. Steve, I believe I've kind of given you the preliminary one. There might be another one. I know that they've kind of fiddled around with it. They think that they're done with the guidelines, but it will be a grant process that the city will have to apply for. The good thing is I've kind of been talking with, BJ, I'm getting my name, TJ. There's BJ and then there's TJ with DNR. I've been talking with TJ on a consistent basis, Mike Sutherland as well from DNR to kind of express our issues. I've also talked to the governor's office. So in these situations where there's a grant, a lot of times people in my role will kind of be the liaison to answer any questions, because there will be a lot of questions. I know from my understanding of the cannabis process years ago, that was another big thing. So
when would the grant process start, do you think? July 1? July 1. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Jake? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Council members, we have a few items left on the work session agenda. We need to move into the main meeting. Do you want to take a brief recess, or do you want to keep going? We'll take a 2-minute recess. 2 minutes. Right, good evening. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, May 9, 2022. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bullen,
Here.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni, Councilmember Nian,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo,
Here.
Councilmember Flasher,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano,
Here.
Councilmember Brost,
Here.
Councilmember Edens,
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Here.
Councilmember Hopper, Councilmember Galani.
Okay, thank you and welcome. For those of you who are comfortably able, if you'd please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Minutes are under the consent agenda, so moving into public participation. I just want to mention a few things about that. Public comment is a valuable component of our meeting. Anyone who wishes to speak must indicate that they would like to do that by raising your hand on Zoom or providing a speaker card to the city clerk who's seated to your left. When your name is called, please stand and state your name and ward. To ensure that all who wish to speak have the opportunity to do so, there is a 5-minute time limitation, and I will let you know when the time limit is reached. If you have any questions for us, please mention that during your remarks and identify the official you would like to respond. That official will make note of it, and at the conclusion of public participation, any official who chooses to respond will have 3 minutes to do so as to all questions directed to that official. The official may choose to respond to your questions after tonight's meeting, and we may also post any responses on the City Council page of our website. Finally, please be respectful to others in making your remarks. This means that interrupting others and using profane and abusive language are prohibited. And I want to thank everyone in advance for following these. And the last thing is relative to all this information that we're now getting at the 11th hour. So we need to move forward with public participation and we can't interrupt that with this. So the council, whoever provided that to you, just know that the council will receive it in due course. First speaker card, please.
The first speaker card is James Van Neck wishing to comment about Old State Road.
Okay, good evening. My name is James Vanek, resident of Ward 7. I'm here to speak to encourage the city of Wildwood to increase the functional classification of Old State Road from its current classification of a major collector to at least a minor arterial. Briefly regarding East-West Gateway, functional classifications are used based upon the road type to add more points to higher classifications of roads, so they will be funded, will have an advantage of being funded. So currently, Hutchison and Old State Road are both considered major collectors. Missouri 109 north of Manchester is considered a minor arterial. Missouri 109 south of Manchester is considered a major arterial. We feel, or I feel at least, that there is a basis, substantial basis for the increase of the functional classification of Old State to at least a minor arterial. And I'm going to use a quick sports analogy, if I may, and considering it's hockey season. So let's say, for example, that the Minnesota Wild next game comes up to the Blues and say, hey, we will give you a penalty shot. Just out of the blue. We'll give you a penalty shot. look that up if you're not a hockey fan. And it's an amazing opportunity to score a point early in the game. So, but the coaching staff at the Blues go, yeah, we don't want it. I mean, want the fans obviously be a little upset that they didn't take advantage of the penalty shot to increase the opportunity to win the game. I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me, but anyway, that's my little sports analogy. This is what East-West Gateway does twice a year, at the end of this month and then late in the fall. I handed these out to me and like, yeah, well, they were distributed. If you look at the first page, top view is obviously Hutchison. Speed limit, I believe 25, 30 miles an hour. I can't remember. But multiple driveways every 40 or 50 feet, multiple stop signs. Next picture down is you can easily identify it as being Old State because there are no shoulders on that road, as opposed to the run below it, which is Missouri 109 north of Manchester. So you can see the similarities between Old State and Missouri 109, but a big discrepancy between Hutchison. Next page, you'll see the beginning of Old State going south, big 5-lane road. You can see the next picture down is Missouri 109 going north, 4-lane road with the median. Next page. Okay, these are the ends of the road going south on Old State, where it kind of ends up in a rural area, and the end of essentially Missouri 109 going north, also in a similar rural area. More than just a feel that there are definitive things within this procedural manual that defines what a functional classification is. I've gone over this quite detailed, and with the information I have, there are numerous, over a dozen perhaps, items that you could point to and say, yes, that Old State is way more like the Missouri 109 than Hutchison ever could be. So I'm here to ask that you would take this up, perhaps in the miscellaneous section at the end of the.
So Mr. Manik, how much more do you have?
Oh, 10 seconds.
Okay.
This is a zero cost, low effort opportunity to hopefully get a score that will meet the muster to get funded for this coming year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
Marilyn Gilbert wishing to comment on Bill 2700.
My name's Marilyn Gilbert. I live in Ward 1. I'm representing the residents who live on Woodland Meadows and who every day risk their lives trying to make a safe left turn onto our street from Highway 100. This problem was created over 20 years ago by MoDOT putting in a right turn lane for Melrose and not giving us a left turn lane. Starting in 2014, we kept begging MoDOT to please give us a left turn lane. Increased traffic. It was a major safety risk. Finally, 5 years ago, after listening to basically what Ryan Piercy was saying to your question about trying to move projects up and get funding and fix problems, we just were so frustrated, we came to the city of Wildwood. And so here we are tonight. Thankfully, we haven't had any fatalities. And thankfully, the city of Wildwood has responded unbelievably to our safety risk. So we made presentations to City Council, Board of Public Safety, the Admin and Public Works Committee, And we truly appreciate all the concern that you've shown for our safety and well-being. And you mentioned, Ryan mentioned it too. Highway 100 is heavily traveled. I've lived out there for 38 years, and the volume of traffic has grown exponentially. The speeds have grown. They're clocking them at 70 miles an hour while we sit there and they illegally pass us, and you have people coming up at you 70 miles an hour. We've had rear end crashes. Our neighbor's truck was totaled. We have near misses every day. And so we tonight are asking you to please pass Bill 2700 and give us a safe left turn so we can resolve this safety issue that we've been living with for over 20 years. And we really want to thank a lot of people in the city of Wildwood, starting with you, Mayor Boland. You met with us twice. You pledged your support. You showed the pictures. I was so happy to see the pictures of how horrible Highway 100 is. And I'm still unclear as to Ryan Percy saying that resurfacing 109 down to FF is a higher priority than saving lives on Highway 100. I don't understand how they can resurface Highway 100 from 109 out to 00 in 2024 and not give us a safe left turn. I'm confused by their program, and I appreciate your adamant plea to please move this timeline up. We also have to thank Rick Brown, who has worked tirelessly and persistently working with MoDOT to try to get this left turn done. 5 years ago, we had a simple $250,000 solution, and MoDOT turned us down. I would like to thank Mr. Garitano, who has listened to our pleas, and your administration Public Works Committee bringing forward these bills to bring us public safety. I would also like to thank Larry Gross and Teresa, our Ward 1 representatives. I know they've been very supportive. And I want to thank all the city council people who have, over the last 5 years, listened respectfully and taken our concerns into consideration. And I guess I have to thank MoDOT, who somehow is coming up with 50% to pay for this. And I want to thank our neighbors on Woodland Meadows. We signed petitions, sent it to the state of Missouri. We sent it to MoDOT. They've attended meetings, and they're here tonight in support of Bill 2700. So again, thank you all. Please pass Bill 2700. You'll be protecting lives and saving lives. And hopefully you won't have me up here constantly making this plea. So,
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
The rest of my speaker cards are for public hearings.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to those of you who came this evening to speak during public participation. Moving next into mayor announcements and appointments, we have no announcements, one appointment. Mr. Lavalley from Ward 4 to the Board of Adjustment. He's going to be a great addition and very happy to put someone from Ward 4 on that board, actually. Unfortunately, with his schedule and so forth, we weren't able to complete the background check that we do. So I would ask if the council is willing to approve him, to make the motion that he be approved subject to that background check coming back satisfactorily. Councilor Farmer.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, and we have a second from Council Member Dodwell. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve Mr. Lavalley to the Board of Adjustment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so that is approved. Next on the agenda is public hearing. However, those notices were published for that to start at 7. So we're going to, with permission of the council, rearrange the agenda and go into our bills and get some of those done. And we'll come back at 7 o'clock and start the public hearing. Is everyone okay with that? Okay, perfect. All right. So moving into the first bill, which is 2613. It is before the council for final passage, and it concerns all wards Just by way of background, this bill was before the council 6 months ago. The council, I guess for lack of a better way of saying it, didn't seem to have much interest, I guess is a good word, in proposing the tax. And so it was postponed to come back 6 months for tonight. I guess one option, if you don't want to pass it at this point, and I can't speak for you obviously, would be to simply do a motion to postpone indefinitely on this. And does it need to be read before that can occur?
No, sir.
Okay. So is there a motion to read the bill, or is there a motion to Councilmember Garetano?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to postpone indefinitely this bill.
Okay, do we have a second? Second by Councilmember McCutcheon. Any discussion on the motion to postpone Bill 2613 indefinitely? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to postpone the bill indefinitely, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion
Abstentions.
carries. You were voting in favor of the motion, Councilmember Edens. I'm sorry, I accidentally.
I
cut you off.
couldn't get my hand up in time. It was too quick to get all the buttons pushed on Zoom, but I just wanted to clarify, because indefinitely we'll kill it forever. Or can we bring it back a different year? Because there's usually a date associated with the bill, correct?
You would need to bring it back as a new bill.
Okay, but that is possible.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And are you voting in favor of postponement indefinitely?
Yes, that'd be fine then. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, and then council members, next, before we get to Bill 20, we have 3 bills before we get to the Highway 100 large items, I would call them. Bills 2699 and 2700 that concerns the Highway 100 MoDOT money. And these are for the first 3 bills, 2676, 2676, 2697, and 2698. Those have obviously been read once. They're here for second reading. Is there any, my thought would be that there's likely no opposition to those 3. We might be able to read those in mass. Would there be any, does anyone plan to speak against final passage of Bill 2676 relating to Ward 8, the design engineering for the Village Green, 2697, the fiscal year modification, and Bill 2698, which relates to concrete street and sidewalk replacement? And so would there then be any objection to doing those in mass? All right, fair enough. That's what we'll do. So Bill 2676, Bill 2697, and Bill 2698 are before the council for final passage. Bill 2676 concerns Ward 8. The other 2 bills concern all wards. Is there a motion for the second reading of the 3 bills? Made by Councilmember Garetano, seconded by Councilmember McCutcheon. All in favor of the motion for second reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, would you please read bills 2676, 2697, and 2698?
Bill 2676, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute all necessary and required items relating to a professional services agreement with Civil Design Incorporated, CDI, as the primary consultant for the development and completion of design, engineering, and bid specifications and plans, including construction management for Phase 1 of Wildwood Village Green in the Town Center area, second reading. Bill number 2697, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, revising the budget for the city of Wildwood, Missouri for the fiscal year commencing on January 1st, 2021 and ending on December 31st, 2021, second reading. Bill number 2698, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a city contract agreement on behalf of the city with M&H Concrete Contractors Incorporated for the FY 2022 concrete street and sidewalk replacement project, including traffic control and other incidental items as shown on the project specifications and drawing, second reading.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vinich, do you have anything you want to mention further relative to Bill 2676? You're muted. Hold on a minute. Can you make sure you're not muted there, Mr. Vinich? We didn't hear you. Still not hearing you.
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me now?
There we go. Yes. We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, we can hear you.
my apologies.
So Joe, can you hear me? Just shake your head. Yes. Okay. Thumbs up. You have something you want to say further. Thumbs down. You do not. Okay. Thank you. And then we'll let that glitch get solved, hopefully. Okay. Rick, Rick Brown, do you have anything you want to say relative to Bill 2698?
No, I can go like this.
Okay.
Well, I don't. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, you're welcome. And I think the Bill 2697 is self-explanatory. All right, council members, any questions for Joe, Rick, or our city administrator on any of these three bills? All right, seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of bills 2676, 2697, and 2698.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Nine,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi.
Yes.
Okay, the bills pass. Moving next, bills 2699 and 2700, as I mentioned, both concern wards 1 and 6 and the improvements to Highway 100 with MoDOT. Also here for second reading, obviously. Would there be any objection to having those two handled collectively? All right, seeing none, would someone like to make a motion for the second reading of bills 2699 and 2700? Made by Councilmember Rambo, seconded by Councilmember Brost. All in favor of the motion for second reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, would you please read bills 2699 and 2700?
Bill 2699, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute the cost share agreement by and between the city of Wildwood, Missouri and the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission to obtain state funding for the design and construction of intersection improvements on State Route 100 at Pond Road and at State Route C in the city. Second reading. Bill number 2700, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a cost share agreement by and between the city of Wildwood, Missouri and the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission to obtain state funding for the design and construction of turn lane improvements on State Route 100 at Manchester Road, Bunis Lane, Woodland Meadows Drive, Hinkin Road, and Hawks Rest Road, Windy Hollow Lane in the city. Second reading.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, anything further you want to mention relative to either of these two bills?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I have nothing additional, but I'm available for any questions.
Okay. Does any member of the council have any questions for Rick or any comments on bills 2699 and 2700? Councilmember Dodwell.
Just because we have some individuals that this is very near and dear to them, Rick, can you explain the timeline for the public on how this is going to roll out, when things will be completed, et cetera?
I'm sure Councilmember Dodwell, I'd be glad to do my best. So the key with the both projects really lies in the year that the money's become available for construction. And I think that's the point that Ryan Piercy was trying to make a little bit earlier, is they're linking these two cost share projects with the resurfacing of Route 100 with the hopes that all three projects could be bid as one in order to reduce cost potentially. So our construction monies for these two improvements aren't available to MoDOT's MoDOT's state fiscal year 2025, which starts July 1, 2024, unfortunately. But that is their approach with regard to the cost share projects and the resurfacing. We'll get started, assuming you guys pass this and we get the signed agreement from MoDOT, we'll get started hiring a consultant engineer for the projects and start the engineering process. I'd like to get through that as soon as possible, maybe by next summer. My mindset would be to get the engineering done as quickly as possible so that we could be in a position to bid the work sooner rather than later. And sometimes money doesn't become free And if your plans are ready and finalized, then we may be able to get it started sooner rather than the planned 2025.
Well, you're gonna need to call roll there in a minute.
Thank you, Ryan.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Rick? Okay, Ms. Elders, would you please call the roll for final passage of bills 2699 and 2700?
Councilmember Nian.
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer.
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo.
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher.
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano.
Yes.
Councilmember Brost.
Yes.
Councilmember Edens.
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Okay, the bills have passed. Why don't we go ahead and finish the last second reading, and then we'll go back into, there's no objection, into the public hearings. That's Bill 2701. It's before the council for final passage. It concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Farmer, second by Councilmember Brost. All in favor of the motion for second reading, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2701.
Bill 2701, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a city consultant agreement with CB Engineering Incorporated, doing business as Cochran, for construction, inspection, and materials testing services for capital improvement projects for the city. Second reading.
Okay, thank you. Rick Brown, anything further you want to mention relative to Bill 2701?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I have nothing additional to mention, but I'm available for any questions from the council.
Okay, any questions for Rick? All right, seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2701.
Councilmember Farmer.
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo.
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher.
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano. Councilmember Brost.
Yes.
Councilmember Edens.
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Nian.
Yes.
I'm also a yes.
Sorry.
A lot of things moving on. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So that bill has passed. So we're now going to go back on the agenda to our public hearings. And so you asked about the information. Let's see, which one do we have first here? Let's go. So why don't you read that, and then once that is read and we start public participation on that, you can hand out the material. Okay. So would you please read, Ms. Eldridge, PZ 12-21.
PZ 12-21, City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission, care of Department of Planning, City Hall, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. A request of the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider the amendment and the change of the zoning district boundaries and classification of properties in the city by establishing the boundaries of the Special Circumstances Overlay District, SCOD, Chapter 415.505, Special Circumstances Overlay District, SCOD, of the zoning ordinance, and including within such district boundaries certain property generally located on the south side of Strucker Road, east of Englebrook Court, consisting of approximately 3.09 acres and with a street address of 162 Strucker Road, St. Louis County, locator number 22U310152, which is currently zoned R1 1 acre residence district.
Thank you. And before we call the first speaker, is there anyone in the audience who is going to be speaking on this particular item, or actually any of the items for public hearing, the three items that was not here when I read the public participation items about how that goes and so forth? If not, I can do it again, but I think everyone that's here heard that earlier. Okay, I think we're good. All right, first speaker card, please.
The first speaker card is Dwayne Moorcourt.
Okay. We can't hand out piecemeal. So do you have anything else you need handed out? Because she's going to hand out all of it at once.
That's all I have for this public hearing.
Do you have any for any other item on public hearing?
There's another public hearing. I have other items.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and give that to her now so she can do it all at once.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
since both of these properties are contiguous to each other and also owned by the same individuals, is my understanding, is there any reason that we can't speak to both properties at the same time, or do we have to take them individually?
I think we take them individually, but City Attorney Young,
We should take them individually.
Okay, just wanted to ask.
do you have anything further, Mr. Markwart, to hand out?
I gave Megan everything I have.
I'm sorry?
I gave Megan everything I have.
So nothing further to hand out?
I don't personally.
Okay, that's my question. Okay, so you're on, go ahead.
My name is Dwayne Markwart, 834 Holly Ridge Drive, Baldwin, Missouri, 63011. Chairman, council members, and other attendees, I'm here to speak on behalf of the exclusion of 162 Strecker Road from the SCOD. And that's the handout that I have passed out to you. To remind you, the Planning and Zoning Commission developed a specific process to regarding including properties into the SCOD. They defined 6 categories for consideration of those properties for potential inclusion into the SCOD. These categories have been published multiple times by the Department of Planning in their background reports. And so if you look on page 3, I've attached for you a sample attachment A report. Those are the 6 criteria that the Planning and Zoning Commission has developed to consider properties to belong in the SCOD. At least one of these 6 criteria must be met to be able to consider a property for inclusion. I've also provided you on page 4 a worksheet that I labeled Table A. Table A addresses those 6 criteria specifically regarding 162 Strecker Road. So if we look at some examples, has it been listed or delisted? The answer is no. Is it located downstream? The answer is no. Has it been on a phase 1 environmental? No. Is it located on any portion? No. Does it over 50% have 30% slope? The answer is no. Is the owner requesting the property be? And the answer is no. So the 6 criteria, all answers are no. The property at 162 Strecker Road does not meet any of the criteria, and thus the property does not qualify to be considered and does not qualify to be included. We've sent this to you many times over the past few months. We are shocked, confused, and frankly frustrated that 162 has even been considered. I feel it is a grave mistake that this property has been listed for consideration. Our immediate action was to request the documentation that would support such a recommendation. We made multiple requests to the mayor, the city administrator, the department, planning and zoning members, Chairman Lee, Chairman Beatty, city council members, Councilmember Dodwell, Councilmember Farmer, and others. We have never received any documentation from anyone that would support considering 162 for the SCOD. Most of the time, we would not even get a response. The city of Wildwood is known for its adherence to the guidelines and do not want to risk the appearance of impriority when making decisions and applying regulations. They rely on documentation, not speculation. They want to see the drawings, they want to see the pictures, they want to see the specifications. If anybody's been to a meeting, you've seen that happen. That is all what we were asking for, was the documentation. Oh yes, we heard a lot of opinions in a lot of meetings. We've heard verbal statements such as, it is next door to the epicenter, Mr. Callahan lived there, and others, but opinions and verbal statements are not part of the 6 criteria. If the documentation does exist, why have they not shared it? We can only conclude there is none. The property at 162 does not meet any of the criteria, and thus the property does not qualify to be considered and does not qualify to be included. Ms. Dodwell, we have not received any documentation from you, so it is obvious they've not provided any to you, and you must now realize that 162 does not meet the criteria. In the interest of preserving the integrity of this process, I cannot imagine how you could vote for inclusion. Mr. Farmer, we have not received any documentation from you, so it's obvious that they have not provided any to you, and you must now realize that 162 does not meet the criteria. In the interest of preserving the integrity of this process, I cannot imagine how you could vote for inclusion. Other council members, thank you for letting me share this information with you. I hope I made it clear that Wildwood does have a process, and the property at 162 Strecker Road does not meet any of the criteria, and thus the property does not qualify to be considered and does not qualify to be included. Our own ward reps were unable to even get that information. Council members, I'm asking each and every one of you to vote to not include 162 in the SCOD. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
Now I'd be glad to answer
The
any
next speaker
questions.
card is
We
Tiffany
don't do that
Morecourt.
during public participation. This is just your time to speak.
Yes, sir. Your guidelines said at the end they could ask questions. Is that different?
So you can ask questions of the council or me, but I think you had about 30 seconds left. If you had any questions, I'll let you go ahead and do that. If you can. do that
I
in
thought
30
they could
seconds.
ask questions at the end of the meeting if they want.
You can ask us questions. We don't ask you questions.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Tiffany Morecourt.
Good evening. My name is Tiffany Marquardt, and I am a homeowner and excited to be a resident of Ward 4 later this summer. Just to echo off of what my father-in-law Dwayne said, there is never been any evidence to show that 162 has been contaminated or has any reason to be included in this SCOD. So I would appreciate it if everybody could do their research before you vote. There is a website, 210strucker.com, that we have created that has all the primary sources listed, which means all of the original documents provided by anybody
Excuse me,
involved.
Just Mr. Marquardt, I'm sorry. She has to serve as the city clerk. Thank you. Go ahead.
So I would urge you to visit 210strucker.com, which has all the primary sources listed. This means that anything that EPA has published, anything that DNR has, any private agency that's been involved, all of the original sources for the property are listed there, and you will see that there is nothing for 162 ever listed. So please consider not voting for 162 to be in the SCOD.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
The last speaker card I have for this hearing is Scott Morecourt.
Good evening, Council. I appreciate you guys being here and your service to the community. My name is Scott Marquardt. I own the property at 162 Strecker Road, and this is one of my sons, Ahmad. Mr. Farmer, or Councilman Farmer, I saw you shake your head no that you haven't received a request. I apologize that you haven't received any requests for documentation, but if any of you has any documentation that supports inclusion of 162 Strecker Road, I would love to see that. I've requested that from the administration. I've requested it from several of the council members, and we have been provided with nothing. 162 Strecker Road has never been part of the Callahan site. It has never had any positive test results on that site and meets zero of the qualifications for consideration of inclusion in the SCOD, much less actual inclusion in the SCOD. So I want to remind all of you that you have an opportunity to make a motion. In that motion, you can request that we be available to answer any and all of your questions and extend the amount of time that we have to speak on this public hearing or other public hearings according to your motion. So thank you again for being here, and thank you for your time and consideration in this matter.
Thank you. Any other speaker cards on this item? Okay, Mr. Vinich, anything you want to mention relative to PZ 12-21?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission originally considered 5 properties as part of this particular group. Of those 5 properties, the 2 that are being considered tonight at public hearing were those that the members recommended should be part and have the special circumstances overlay district associated with them. Primary amongst the reasons for this action was the white paper that had been prepared by the City of Wildwood in 2016 relative to 5 properties on the north side of Strecker Road, and then 4 properties to the south of Strecker Road, and then inclusive of 157 Strecker Road. As you know, recently, the City Council approved 5 properties for the Special Circumstances Overlay District that were inclusive of the Bliss sites and Strecker Forest subdivision. Tonight, again, the 2 properties highlighted by the red boundary line are those that are being considered for this overlay district. If there are any questions or comments, certainly the department would be glad to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benich. Are there any questions for Mr. Benich or any comments relative to this public hearing item? All right, seeing none, thank you. Moving next, up to the next public hearing item, PZ 16-21. Ms. Eldridge, would you please read it?
PZ 16-21, City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission, care of Department of Planning, City Hall, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. A request of the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider the amendment and the change of the zoning district boundaries and classification of properties in the city by establishing the boundaries of the Special Circumstances Overlay District, SCOD, Chapter 415.505, Special Circumstances Overlay District, SCOD, of the zoning ordinance, and including within such district boundaries certain property generally located on the south side of Strecker Road, east of Englebrook Court, consisting of approximately 7.51 acres and with a street address of 210 Strecker Road, St. Louis County locator number 22U220242, which is currently zoned NU non-urban residence district.
Okay, thank you. Any speaker cards? Okay, first speaker card, please.
The first speaker card is Mitch Peters.
Hi, my name's Mitch Peters. I live at 1606 Englebrook, Ward 4. I've lived there approximately 26 years. I'm a butt up against 210 Strecker, which is the old Callahan property. And I'm against this SCOD. The site's been cleaned up. This has been going on for 30 years. And I really see no purpose in it. I don't understand. There's other mechanisms. Should someone choose to develop the property, I don't understand what you're trying to accomplish or protect. It's taken a lot of time and effort. I worked all day. I'm tired. I'd like to thank you because I would never do what you do, to come in here after working all day. I'm just really tired of this. And I've spoken with most of my neighbors. It's hearsay, but they're all opposed to this and don't understand it either. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
Next speaker card is Dwayne Marquardt.
So Mayor, here's the issue I have. In my nervous activities, I gave all my copies to Megan. And so if someone can share me with one of the extra copies, I can go over it.
We'll take care of that for you. Which one is it, Mr. Marquardt?
You have it?
Mr. Marquardt, we're going to let the city clerk take care of it. You'll just stay right where you are.
Sir, hi. I don't have it photographed and memorized.
Okay. Well, we'll hand you several of them and you can pick from among those. Is that it there?
Thank you. Now, do you need a copy?
We're good. Go ahead, Mr. Marquardt.
I asked him if he needed a copy.
I'll share with you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dwayne Marquardt, 834 Holly Ridge Drive, Baldwin, Missouri, 63011. Chairman, council members, and other attendees, I'm here to speak on behalf of the exclusion of 210 Strickler Road from the SCOD. Historically, a small area of 210 Stricker Road was contaminated with paints and paint solids. Dioxin was never found in any depth on the property. The lead was removed down to bedrock in 2012. Cleanup and remedial measures were complete and comprehensive. One of the questions raised by the planning and zoning is, does anything remain from past stewardship at 210 Stricker Road that cannot be addressed by other means of the municipal code? The answer is nothing remains. The EPA performed removal actions in 1981 and 82, and in 2012, removing drums and soil to the bedrock. Dioxin was never contaminated in the concern of the 210 Callahan subsite. Dioxin was never been detected by the EPA and the Missouri DNR from almost 50 soil samples collected and analyzed. The contaminants were paint and paint solids. Additionally, the EPA and Missouri DNR have performed tests on hundreds of soil samples, surface water, and deep water wells from 1981 to 2015 to determine that 210 Strecker Road has been restored. The EPA concluded and conducted a human health risk assessment, included that no further response is necessary. Based on the muscle investigations and successive removal actions from 1980 to 2015, the EPA and the Missouri DNR and multiple professionals have concluded that the 210 Strecker Road, formerly Callahan property, no longer poses unacceptable health risk for any type of current or future exposure scenario. The property is now safe for unlimited and unrestricted exposure, including residential use. Scott and Tiffany knew there was a history at 210 Strecker. They have learned, unfortunately, that not very many people know the accurate information. Based on the hundreds of hours spent by Scott and me, our families, environmental specialists, and other experts, I am confident we can trust the professionals. We have sorted through the misinformation and the speculation and feel this property is safe for their family, safe for their health and all activities. Before they made an offer on the property, they reviewed the history of the contamination, the cleanups, and the present status of the property. Scott is a landscape contractor and Tiffany is an epidemiologist. They are acutely aware of contamination and safety. They could not find anything wrong. The cleanup had been complete and the property is safe for all residential uses. They did not stop there. They spent thousands of dollars hiring professional consultants to see if they had missed anything. The consultants reviewed all the data, the environmental studies, the cleanups, and other activities for the last 50 years. The consultants concluded 162 was never contaminated, and the former contamination at 210 Strecker Road is completely safe, and is completely clean. Both are now safe and safe to occupy, safe for their family and all residential activities. Only after the research concluded that the property is completely safe did they close on the purchase of the property. I provided you with a worksheet labeled Table B. It addresses specifically 210 Strecker Road. As you know, the Planning and Zoning Commission spent considerable time and deliberation to develop, then unanimously agreed on characteristics of a property to be included in the SCOD. The property at 210 Strecker Road no longer meets any of the inclusion criteria. So if you look on the last page, it has those criteria that the Planning and Zoning came up with, and it asks questions like, is there anything that provisions in the municipal code? Can anything, does it require restriction from any types of use? And the answer is no, 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 no. Can this property be used since all factors about this property, the past use and area is yes. So that table is what I'm hoping that you can rely on to be able to make a reasonable decision about that. Council members, thank you for letting me share this information with you. I hope I made it clear that Wildwood does have a process and the property at 210 Strecker Road has been successfully remediated and no longer meets the criteria. Please do not let the biases and the misinformation mislead your judgment. Council members, I'm asking you for your vote of not including 210 Strecker Road in the SDOD.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Tiffany Morcourt.
Good evening. My name is Tiffany Marquardt, and I am a homeowner and excited to be a resident of Ward 4 later this summer. I realize what I'm about to say may sound unconventional in the beginning, but if you bear with me for a moment, you will quickly see the relevance to tonight's public hearing. I'm speaking tonight as an individual that has a master's degree in public health epidemiology and biostatistics with past positions at the CDC, the Pennsylvania Department of Health, St. Louis County Department of Health, and Lindenwood University as an adjunct faculty member, all in addition to my role as mother and homeowner in Wildwood. Mayor Bolin, did you have this building tested for Legionella prior to the public hearing this evening? It is summer. The AC is running more often in City Hall and drinking fountains sat stagnant for quite some time due to COVID in the past. Aren't you concerned about the citizens of Wildwood contracting Legionnaire's disease while gathered in this building? Anywhere from 5 to 10% of those who contract this disease will die from it. Councilmember Farmer, were you tested for measles before you arrived tonight? Yes, it may be rare and vaccine preventable, but it is on the rise in the US. In 2019, there were 13 reported outbreaks in this country of this highly contagious disease. Approximately 30% of cases are reported to have one or more complications, including death. Certainly not something we want to spread in our community. Councilmember Dodwell, were you tested for tuberculosis before you arrived at this meeting tonight? TB disease is the leading cause of death due to infectious disease in the world. In the US in 2019, there are approximately 2.7 cases per 100,000 people. That might not sound too bad to you, but 13 million people in this country have latent TB, meaning that while they are not ill and infectious at the moment, the bacteria can wake up at any time, making them ill and infectious to others. This certainly sounds like something the community should be concerned about, correct? I'm going to make a big assumption that no, City Hall was not tested for Legionella and the other two members did not go to the lab this afternoon. Why? Because there are no signs or symptoms to warrant testing for these conditions. If you showed up at your physician's office demanding a measles test, you would be counseled on your health. You have no fever, no rash, no respiratory symptoms, nothing. You are just scared you might die of this disease because you know of someone else who has it and you're fearful of getting it. When you do not have signs and symptoms, a test is not warranted. We do not test healthy people based on fear or paranoia. Testing is expensive, time-consuming, and frankly pointless unless you have a sign or symptom or fit the case definition of an outbreak situation. So now the relevance to tonight's public hearing. In 2017, the Environmental Protection Agency delisted my property at 210 Strecker, the former Callahan site. After extensive cleanup, the EPA performed testing at my property and the results show the property is no longer contaminated and it is suitable for unrestricted use. The Department of Natural Resources has stated exactly the same, and several private environmental firms have concurred with additional phase 1 testing at the property and said it is no longer a threat to public health and safety. There is absolutely no reason to continue requiring or promoting testing at 210 Strecker Road. There are no signs and symptoms of any environmental issues, as stated again by the EPA, DNR, and multiple private environmental firms. To continue enforcing restrictions on this property and my other property at 162 Strecker Road that was never even a concern for the EPA in the first place is a complete waste of time, resources, and money. While environmental professionals from multiple agencies have stated that no further testing is needed at this property, the city of Wildwood is continuing to state otherwise and disagree with the environmental professionals. I am demanding that you use professional judgment backed by science to make your determinations rather than choosing to use fear-based alarmist decisions that will continue costing extreme amounts of time, resources, and money for Wildwood residents. By including my two properties in the SCOD, you are telling the community to be fearful of something that has no signs or symptoms, just as I described above when I try to invoke a bit of alarm about 3 highly contagious diseases that could affect those here tonight. I would much rather see Wildwood spend taxpayer dollars preventing deaths from existing issues, such as the 16 preventable car crash fatalities in Wildwood within the past 5 years, by using resources to fix the roads as the city has been advised. One of my 5 young children is more likely to be killed by a car speeding down Strecker Road past my home than by a hypothetical fear-based cancer that may or may not be attributed to an environmental issue in the future. I want to address public health concerns that are supported by evidence-based science, not ones that are merely based in fear due to past resolved issues. Yes, the former Callahan site had issues in the past, but it is no longer a threat to public health and safety. The paint-related waste and solvents were cleaned up, the area retested, and found to have no concerns. Never was dioxin detected at my property. We are now at the 4th goal of the EPA Superfund program, which is to return Superfund sites to productive use. It is now time to conclude that 210 Strecker is clean, ready for unrestricted use, and allow us, the new homeowners, to bring this property back to a beautiful horse farm as it was in the past. We want our neighbors to enjoy seeing our beautiful property and be proud to live in the area with us, just as we want to be proud of our property. We want to raise our young children in the safe, beautiful Wildwood area. We would never consider raising our young family here if it was not safe for them. And in my professional opinion, after reviewing all the documentation related to my property, I know my property is safe as concluded by the EPA. Please do not include these properties in the SCOD and cause my family and neighbors undue stress to maintain our properties as well as devalue our properties. Please take time this month before voting on this issue to review the primary sources of all documentation at 210strecker.com rather than relying on Mayor Boland's white paper that is filled with inaccuracies. One sentence. Take this time to do your own research and read the sources so you can make an educated vote. If you have any questions, please make a motion to invite me, Scott, or any other expert to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Scott Morcourt.
Good evening again. The handout that you have that has Forrest Gump walking down the road is the handout that's going to be relevant to what I'm going to be speaking about. Again, my name is Scott Marquardt. I own the property at 210 Strecker Road. Mama always said you got to put the past behind you before you can move on. So let's talk a little bit about the past and where we can go in the future. The Ellisville Superfund site, as shown on page 2, is comprised of 3 separate non-contiguous sub-sites. The Rosalie sub-site was located off of Thunderhead Canyon and has since been developed into a neighborhood. The Bliss sub-site is on the north side of Strecker Road and is not completely cleaned and still has some contamination on site. The Callahan sub-site, which is the subject of the white paper, 210 Strecker Road, and the only subject of the white paper, is on the south side of Strecker Road. The next page is a map image of what the site looked like in 1981. Laid on there is a white and red hash lines showing the area where the contamination was found on the site. Notice the farm that is to the left or west side of that. That is the Callahan farm at that time. Way to the east is 162 Strecker. It's about 450 feet to the east. 2 further pages long shows an overlay of where the barn was later constructed, as well as the area of contamination again. It shows how close the contamination is to the homes of Mr. Peters, Mr. Dauramaju, and Mrs. Phillips. Mitch Peters' home is going to be in, or some of those homes are going to be shown in later photos. There's several photos. I'm not going to go through all of those due to the time limitations today, but it shows the vastness of the excavation that was done on the site. Over 2,000 cubic yards of dirt were excavated and hauled out of this site to get all of the contamination out of it. There's a couple homes in the background of several of the photos. One is Mrs. Phillips' house. One is the, sorry, I struggle with their name, Dara Maju. And then a little bit further to the right is Mitch Peters' home, which is out of the image of the camera. One of the last photos, or I think it is the last photo, shows what the site was after the remediation was completed. It shows that they put in some erosion control measures and seeded the site. Going on past the photos is a letter from the Department of Natural Resources supporting the EPA's delisting of the site. The Department of Natural Resources says that the site is fully clean. The next is a letter from the Environmental Protection Agency to my wife and I saying that the site is clean and completely remediated. You have those letters in full as additional handouts tonight. In a summary response to the city of Wildwood from the EPA stated that the EPA and MDNR have collected and analyzed almost 50 soil samples for dioxin at the Callahan site. Dioxin has never been detected. The EPA also conducted groundwater investigation at the property where 3 wells were installed. All groundwater samples at the Callahan site were non-detect for any contaminants of concern. Going on to the next page is just an image of a phase 1 environmental site assessment that my wife and I paid for to have done on the site prior to purchasing the properties. They analyzed all historical records for both 162 and 210 Strecker Road. And the conclusion is that it is a historical site. There are no current contaminations and no current concerns. The next 2 pages are from additional experts that we hired. Mr. Piontek is a Wildwood resident and manages an environmental research firm. He determined that there is no evidence to support claims that the Callahan property is not safe for unrestricted use. We also hired Environmental Operations Incorporated, and they determined that no remaining environmental concerns exist at the property. The white paper, Mr. Mayor Boland is going to tell you that the property is contaminated based on the facts of the white paper, but Mayor Boland said that the white paper was written by experts. He tried to hide the fact that he's the one that wrote the white paper. He's not an expert on this field. He's a brilliant man, but not the expert in this.
Mr. Marquardt, how much more do you have?
I have about another 15 seconds.
Okay, go ahead.
The experts have determined that this property is safe and is no longer a concern. Wildwood was confused. The EPA stated that it's confused, wrote a letter to Wildwood in that regard. So clarity is your option. You can make a difference here. Please make a motion to allow me to answer your questions. You can invite the real experts to answer their questions. I'm willing to pay them to come and talk to you. Please demand that the administration provide you with the data to support the white paper and their recommendation. As Forrest Gump said, that's all I got to say about that. Thank you for your time.
Next speaker card, please.
I have a speaker card from Jason Rhodes, but he is checked. He does not want to speak, but wants his comments included into the record.
Okay, please make sure his comments are included in the record. Any further, and actually, can you read his comments? I think the council should have the benefit.
Please vote against this special district. It is bad for our neighborhood and bad for Wildwood.
Okay, thank you. So we'll make sure that council, could you read it again? They couldn't hear you. That's okay.
Please vote against this special district. It is bad for our neighborhood and bad for Wildwood.
Okay. So I want to get that in front of the council. Any other comments, either written or oral? Okay, so that'll close the hearing on this one. Mr. Benich, do you have anything you want to mention relative to PZ 16-21?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, I want to emphasize that the Special Circumstances Overlay District is not a prohibition against development. It is a process to exercise caution relative to sites that have a history. And in this particular case, the history is associated with two gentlemen that chose to proceed forward and put people at risk. Certainly, the Environmental Protection Agency and the Missouri Department of Natural Resources are experts both here in the state of Missouri and across the United States. However, we have had our experts via the white paper analyze the testing protocols, the composite samples, and other information, and drew conclusions that the delisting may have been premature. And so from that perspective, the caution that is being recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission is logical. And with that, if there are any questions regarding this particular recommendation, the department would be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Joe, if and when the Markwards, or if they choose no longer to be owners of this property, should choose to do any type of development on this property, wouldn't they have to request specific steps that will be required to do this? I'm trying to understand the advantage of putting a SCODE on a location that, as was stated, the EPA has already found to be not an issue. And so I'm just trying to understand where we're going here and what options the individuals who purchased the property have.
Mr. Benich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Dodwell, there's really three approaches to developing a property that's residentially zoned, and in this case, the non-urban residence district. In the non-urban resident district, this particular site could be developed under the 3-acre requirement, meaning that it would be just a record plat. Prior to the discussion of the Special Circumstances Overlay District, there was the Planned Residential Development Overlay District, and now, again, the Special Circumstances Overlay District. So 3 approaches. 2 of those approaches do not necessarily have the protections in place that the new overlay district, the Special Circumstance Overlay District, has. And again, as you'll recall from discussions when the regulations were being presented for consideration, it looks much, much greater and harder, so to speak, at the front end of the process, just to make sure that the information that is provided to the commission members and then City Council is the information that is germane, not dated, and reflects an effort to ensure that the site is clean from past practices or concerns. Secondly, it's at the back end of the process. So ultimately, if development is approved, there's a legacy associated with it that allows not only the first set of owners, but subsequent owners to know that this is an area that had special oversight. And from their perspective, if it's developed, they should know that it's a safe location. So process-wise, the middle part of this is kind of the same, but it's really looking at the front and back ends of the zoning to make sure that we've done everything we can as a city to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare. Thank you.
Can I ask another question? Sure. In looking at your documentation on the protest petitions, et cetera, that have been filed by the owners of the property, you're indicating a little bit more detail was missing or certain protocols weren't followed. What kind of information did you provide to the owners of this property about how they were to be communicating with the Board of Public Safety, the Planning and Zoning Commission, the council, et cetera? What did the department do to let them know?
So if you're okay with it, given the pervasiveness of the requests and so forth. I think it may be better if the city attorney took a shot at answering that question before Mr. Benich. Would you be agreeable with that?
That's fine.
Mr. Young.
In terms of the protests themselves, obviously the procedures are set forth in city code, which were cited in the protest for which they were clearly aware. In addition, they are represented by counsel, at least 2 attorneys that have spoken before this body, therefore providing them any specific legal advice as to how to file those protests would not have been appropriate.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Benich? Councilor Bertolino.
Joe, if the current owners, if they bring a plan to you for some construction on the property and so on, what additional requirements are going to be required of them that you wouldn't normally require of anyone bringing forward a plot plan or especially if they're saying they're not going to disturb the soil, they're just going to remodel the house and take occupancy? Is there really anything in this code that prevents that?
Mr. Benich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Bertolino, the Special Circumstances Overlay District is a development tool. And so in past discussions with the Marquarts, I've explained to them that property maintenance, certain small construction projects of outbuildings that would not disturb the soil, so to speak, and other activities may well be permitted without any special permitting or any permitting required. And so the intent is not to preclude them to maintain the property, to use the property under its current zoning district designation, but it's really a new development tool. Thank you.
Any other questions for Joe? Okay, so council members, we've had hearing on 2 of these items, PZ 12-21 and PZ 16-21. At this point, if the council wants to do it, a motion would be in order to have legislation prepared to support the inclusion of them within the code, and that would come back to the council. And if you wanted to make that motion, you could make it either singularly as to each of them, or you could make it in plural as to both before we go to the next hearing. Councilmember Farmer.
I'll make the motion to start the legislation on both.
To have the legislation prepared on both. Okay, is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilmember Clark. Is there any discussion on the motion? You see no discussion. We'll try to do a voice vote, see where that goes. And if we need to, we can do something more definitive. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have 2 opposed, Councilmember Ottenberg and Councilmember Dodwell and Councilmember Bertolino. Okay, we'll do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
No.
Councilmember Flasher,
No.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
No.
Councilmember Dodwell,
No.
Councilmember Bertolino,
No.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan,
Yes.
Okay, so the motion passes 8-5. So we'll have the legislation presented at the next council meeting, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Young?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Okay, moving next to PZ 30-21. Could you please read that, Ms. Eldridge?
Notice is hereby given that at its meeting on April 11th, 2022, pursuant to section 415.500 subsection I3 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, the City Code, and of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, the City Council exercise its power of review of the Planning and Zoning Commission's denial certain changes to chapter 415 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Wildwood by enacting a new section 415.600, supplementary regulations for agricultural and aquacultural operations, which would thereby allow the restoration and authorization of any use permitted by right on any site therein, having said type of activity in association with it without affecting its non-conforming nature.
Thank you. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, I have one speaker card from Nancy Fisher.
Hello, my name is Nancy Fisher and I live with my husband Dan at 2066 Wild Horse Creek Road in Ward 1. Before I begin, I would like to go on record to say that I thought it was interesting this public hearing was on the agenda. No cards were passed out, no sign was posted, and maybe I misunderstand the rules, but I assume that that's what had to happen before a public hearing was presented. But I'll continue with my comments and maybe somebody can answer that afterwards. Last week, I sent you all an email encouraging you to review the 9+ year history of the aquaculture noise issue that may be on the agenda for tonight, is on the agenda. I know it was a big ask, as this is just some of the documentation that we have on it. Some of you have been around for quite some time on the council and are very aware of what we have lived through and dealt with since October of 2012. For those of you that are relatively new to the council on this topic, I will still spare you and not go into all of this history tonight, obviously. I know you all take matters that come before you very seriously, so I'll trust that you will have done your due diligence to become familiar with all that's transpired. Over the last couple of years, the owner of the aquaculture operation finally indicated he would be replacing all of the noise-making motors with newer, quieter models. The changing of the motors met with one issue after another. To be honest, that's always been the case with this entire situation, but that's something you can see in the public comments over the last 9 years. We patiently waited and listened over several months to numerous reasons why it took so long. We're not unreasonable people, and we understand that life happens, people get sick, and things take time. Finally, once we learned the motors had been changed, and prior to the last testing, we repeatedly asked for 2 specific things to be done. One, we wanted to be assured that a city representative would confirm visually that all 6 of the aerator motors at the operation had in fact been changed out, as was indicated by the owner. Mr. Vunich and another city employee were able to do this with a relatively high level of certainty that the new motors were in fact installed. 2, we also asked repeatedly that all the motors be tested individually as well as all running, 6 running at the same time. The owner had ample time leading up to the testing to ensure that all were in operational order, and given that they were new motors, this did not seem like an unreasonable request. You can imagine our surprise at the next meeting when we were told that while the test did take place, it was only done on 3 of the 6 new motors, as the owner, Dr. Thunder, and the city of Wildwood, as the owner told Dr. Thunder and the city of Wildwood that 3 of those new motors were already not functioning. This was inconceivable to us, yet the test went ahead as planned. In our opinion, the testing definitely should have been rescheduled until all of the motors were functioning. There was absolutely no excuse for the owner to not have had them all in working order, knowing full well the test was imminent. We have heard time and again over the last 9 years how the aquaculture owner has been nothing but cooperative through this entire process. Yet there were years of solutions provided, help offered by engineers on this very council, and countless other suggestions of how he could mitigate the sound, all to no avail. Once again, with this last testing, any logical person could see that if there were a true spirit of cooperation, the owner would have been certain that every motor was in perfect running condition. Had that test proved successful, this issue could have been resolved a year ago, and we would not be here tonight. We've now spent the last year attending numerous planning and zoning meetings where this topic and the findings of the latest Dr. Thunder test done in March or April of 2021 were discussed in great detail, with Dr. Thunder attending at least one of the meetings. 9 of your colleagues listened intently to all of the details and asked endless and intelligent questions. Armed with all of the testing results and all of the information, they still unanimously voted to decline further action on this until all 6 motors could be tested and vetted. We've been through a terrible time with this situation for the last several years. I'm sorry. You've often asked you to put yourself in our place, being subjected for over 8 years to a nonstop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year squealing noise that took away all enjoyment or outside use of our property. So forgive us if we sound dramatic, but it's been incredibly painful. But I ask you to not just listen to our comments or those of our neighbors, Chuck Gulas and Gil Smith, that have also been directly affected. But please, you must take into consideration those 9 colleagues and the reasonable and logical conclusion they came to. Please believe me when I say that we are much more anxious than all of you to put together to have this issue behind us. So please do not stop short when we might almost be at the finish line, not only for ourselves and our neighbors, but for the owner of the aquaculture business as well. Please insist that all the
Ms.
motors.
Fisher, how much more do you have?
One sentence.
Okay.
Please insist that all the motors be tested so we can have more concrete assurance that the noise will be gone and we can put this issue to bed once and for all. Thank you for your time and our service to your beautiful city.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett, do you have anything you want to mention relative to this public hearing item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, with your permission. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, this particular item is before you tonight after the members of City Council exercise power of review. I would note that the Planning and Parks Committee of City Council spent the better part of a year reviewing this particular matter in the context of our noise code, aquaculture operations, and the zoning ordinance. Ultimately, the Planning and Parks Committee did forward a recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission supporting one change relative to the aquaculture regulations. That one change would restore permitted uses allowed by the underlying zoning district designation where an existing but non-conforming and legal aquaculture operation might exist. To that end, the Planning and Zoning Commission received that report, and a letter of recommendation did not support that change based upon the lack of testing of all 6 motors in an operational scenario. The department presented that report, and again, the power of review was exercised. I would just note so that you, as council members, understand that 3 professional firms have been hired by the city over the course of the past 10 years to undertake testing. In all instances, none of those tests indicated that the operation of the aquaculture facility exceeded the city's noise code standards. The latest test, completed by Acoustical Associates, Dr. Tom Thunder and his son Steve, was without the benefit of 6 motors running. The rescheduling was not considered because the department was assured by the experts, Dr. Thunder and his son Steve, that there is a mathematical formula to treat the additional 3 motors without the benefit of them being operational. Mr. Lisk has agreed to try to get the motors running and allow further testing. But again, tonight, the matter is before the City Council based upon the exercise of power review. If there are any questions regarding this particular matter, the department would be glad to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. And as he pointed out, there has been considerable discussion about this. So here are the options for the council. Option 1 is to do nothing, in which case the planning and zoning action changes. And to put this in context, the CUP has the request that's before the council tonight relates to modifying the Planning and Zoning Commission's action to allow the landowner to place a house on the property without a conditional use permit. And that got entwined with all of the noise analysis. So council has 2 options. Option 1 is to do nothing, in which case the Planning and Zoning Commission action, which is that cannot occur without a CUP, stands. The second option, and that's why this was brought before review, because there was discussion about this at the last meeting, would be to make a motion to have legislation prepared to overturn that decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission and allow the home to be constructed without a CUP, which would mean that all of the motors would not be tested. So would anyone like to make a motion? If not, the P&Z action will stand. Councilmember Flasher.
I will make the option for the motion for the second item.
Okay, so we have a motion to have legislation prepared which would allow the landowner to place the house on the property without a conditional use permit. That would also include no additional testing on the motors that were not operational at the time of the test. Is there a second to that motion? Seeing no second, the motion dies for lack of a second. The action of the Planning and Zoning Commission will stay as is. That concludes our public participation. And I'm sorry, actually, there is one thing I apologize. The speaker mentioned the issue of the hearing notice, and I would like, for not only the speaker's benefit and the council's benefit, but the public's benefit, as to how this was noticed and the propriety of that. So, Mr. Young, would you please let us know that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this particular action proposed a change to the zoning code, and therefore the notice requirements did not require, it didn't affect a particular property, it was effective citywide. So the notice requirement did not require posted or mailed notices to adjacent property owners, because there are no adjacent property owners, because it was not specific to one property. It's a citywide policy regulation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving next into first readings, just a question. We have three of them. Bill 2706, which relates to a modification in Ward 8 to allow a residence to be constructed, a 10,000 square foot residence. Bill 2707 relates to consultant to HR Green to conduct a traffic study relative to BA intersection Highway BA, State Route BA with State Route 109. And Bill 2708 relates to sidewalk repairs in Ward 3. Does any member, I want to find out how we handle these and try to make a decision here. So does any member of the council plan on speaking against any of these three bills? Would there therefore be any objection on the part of any member of the council to handling these en masse? All right, seeing none, we'll do that. Bill 2706, Bill 2707, and Bill 2708 are before the council first reading concerning wards 8. As to 2706, wards 1, 3, and 5 as to Bill 2707, and Ward 3 as to 2708. Is there a motion for the first reading of the three bills? Made by Councilmember Ottenberg, seconded by Councilmember Brost. All in favor of the motion for first reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2706, 2707, and 2708.
Bill 2706, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, approving a change in zoning from the R1 1-acre residence district with the conditional use permit CUP to the R3 10,000 square foot residence district for a 1.4 acre tract of land that is located on the southeast corner of Center Avenue and Bordeaux Walkway. First reading. Bill number 2707, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a city consultant agreement with HR Green Incorporated to complete a traffic study of State Route 109 from State Route BA South to Clayton Road, which will evaluate and recommend future improvements to the corridor. First reading. Bill number 2708, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a city contractor agreement on behalf of the city with Precision Concrete Cutting LLC for sidewalk repairs on residential streets within Garden Valley Farms, Oak Ridge Trails, and West Hampton Woods subdivisions. First reading.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Bennett, do you have anything you want to mention relative to Bill 2706?
Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, a public hearing was held regarding this particular rezoning. On the 1.5 acre site, it is the intent of Wayland Custom Homes to construct four new single-family detached dwellings on lots of approximately 14,000 square feet. If there are any questions regarding this particular rezoning, the department would be glad to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Joe? Councilmember Ottenberg.
Just curious, would it be appropriate to have a second reading of all three bills tonight?
So the second two have monetary implications to them. This is obviously something the council can do unless there's urgency to it, given that those two have monetary aspects. My personal preference is to separate the second readings to the next meeting to give the residents more of an ability to comment on it, should they choose to come here and do that. but let's take these one at a time and we'll answer that question. So Mr. Vinich, the 2706 has no monetary aspect to it. Second reading, supportive of that or not?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, the department would not object to a second reading. Given the scrutiny, this particular request received at Planning and Zoning Commission, and many of the issues were answered there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rick, before we get to second reading, well, as part of I was going to ask you, do you have anything you want to share with the council relative to bills 2707 and 2708? And the question I have for you in your answer, and you obviously heard that discussion, is whether there's any urgency to having either of these approved this evening as a matter of second reading rather than waiting for the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing additional to add, but I'm available for any questions. And as far as the second reading, I was not planning on it at this point, so I think we'd be fine with an approval at our next meeting, even if that's June.
Okay, do you have anything? Thank you. Do you have anything you want to mention on either of these?
No, I do not. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Does any member of the council have any questions relative to any of these three? Councilmember Garitano?
Yeah, my opinion would be we just follow the process because I haven't seen any requests that we have to do this for a second read. And the monetary would certainly want to make sure we have it out there for our residents. So I would just say let's reserve that option when we really need it.
So would you support second reading of Bill 2706 that has no monetary implication in your ward?
Again, I haven't gotten any requests. So again, I would just allow it to follow through the process.
Okay. So have you read the three bills? Yeah. Okay. So three bills have been read. If someone wants to make a motion for second reading as to any of them, you can do that. And if you do, we will handle the motion or not. Does anyone wish to make a motion for second reading on any of the three bills this evening? All right, they'll be on the agenda for the next council meeting. That takes us to resolutions. We have none. Consent agenda, we have two items. One is the approval of minutes from the meeting of the council work session and regular meeting from April 25th, 2022. The second is, I'm pleased to report that given the all the items we've had on our agenda this evening and how we have structured the business of the city moving forward, that it would not be necessary to have a second May meeting. And so if you are comfortable with the process that we've done on expenditures, whereby I approve those, but only after they are provided to the council beforehand, then we can do that. So these are the two items for consent agenda. We just need a motion, if you are agreeable, to approve both items on the consent agenda. Councilmember Clark?
I will make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to approve both items on the consent agenda, seconded by Councilmember Ottenberg. Is there any discussion on the motion? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, under miscellaneous, we've already discussed, I believe, the protest petitions. Anything further you need to or want to mention relative to that, Mr. Vinich?
And Mr. Mayor, the Department of Planning, with assistance from the city attorney, reviewed the information submitted by the Marquardt relative to the two properties. The Department of Planning, again, with the assistance of the city attorney, determined that they are faulty in terms of the requirements based upon local code and state statute. So in terms of the protest petitions, the department is recommending they not be accepted. If there are any questions, Mr. Young and I are available. Thank you.
Any questions for Joe or the city attorney relative to that? All right, seeing Councilmember Dodwell.
I understand they may not follow protocol, but why would we not want to have a resident's perspective included in the record?
City Attorney Young.
The resident's perspective is in the record. It's a matter of triggering the 2/3 majority voting requirement. That's what the protest petition does. So you can accept them and read them. The issue becomes, do they trigger the 2/3 voting requirement? And my recommendation and suggestion would, because the code requires the city to verify any protest petition for sufficiency of the legal requirements, to actually have a motion and declare them inadequate under the city code.
You're asking for that motion to be made at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Would someone like to make that motion? To declare the protest petitions as inadequate under the city code. So we have a motion by Councilmember Farmer. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Jaxie. Is there any discussion on the motion? See no discussion, we'll try a voice vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Show of hands for opposed, please. Councilmember Flasher, Councilmember Ottenberg, and Councilmember Dodwell. Motion carries. That takes us to adjournment. I'm sorry. Anything else under miscellaneous before we adjourn and go into the work session? Councilmember Flasher.
Yeah, in reference to what Mr. Vanek said, I just want to clarify. I guess I have a question more or less in my miscellaneous. Would there potentially be an extra cost to the city if we were able to change our classification? Maybe that's directed towards Mr. Cross. I don't know. But if we were able to get a higher functional classification, as he's suggesting, could there be an additional cost to the city in regards to maintaining that classification?
Mr. Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The short answer would be no, there would probably not be an additional cost to the city. However, by changing the classification and with the mayor's permission, Mr. Brown could perhaps provide some additional detail. But the additional point, singular, that would be obtained by changing the classification from one classification to another would still have the city woefully short of what it would require to get federal funding for the roundabout, which is what this is all about. But in addition, there would be a requirement, as Mr. Brown has explained it, if it goes to the next classification, that classification would allow different kind of traffic, more traffic, perhaps higher speed limits would go along with that, as well as other requirements of the road itself. Again, no cost to the city, but it would require the county. There would be additional costs, but the county would bear that. But there's a lot of changes that go along with that additional.
The county would have to go forward with this.
The county ultimately would need to approve going to changing the classification of that.
And they would take on a cost.
They would take on a cost.
Okay, thank you.
And just for clarification, I think what I heard you say is, putting the cost aside, it is the position of our Director of Public Works and you that moving forward with that may not be advantageous given what it would open up relative to the thoroughfare. Is that correct?
That is the discussion that Director Brown and I have had, and that is correct.
Thank you. Councilmember Garetano.
Yeah, would it be possible, just so that we get maybe a memorandum that just details the concerns of changing that classification? And that way,
Great idea. Without objection from the council, we'll ask either our city administrator, they can decide, or Mr. Brown to prepare that and provide it to the council.
In fact, Mr. Brown already has a memorandum to that effect, and he can circulate that to the council.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Rambo.
Very trivial question, but I'm curious as to why we moved the approval of the minutes to the end of the agenda. So
That's all right. So the idea of a consent agenda, that's a great question. The idea of a consent agenda is to put items, well, first of all, it's to expedite the meeting of the council. And it's to put items that are likely going to be mundane and non-controversial. And so that's the reason. That's the reason. And so if you can handle two things with one vote as opposed to separating them and doing two votes, it just makes everyone's life better. So far, I don't think I put anything on there that we had to take off, maybe one, but and that's the other thing I want to add. Anytime, so I put those on the consent agenda with that expectation in mind. But obviously I don't read minds. And so if there's something on the consent agenda that a council member wants to discuss separately or vote on separately, either or both of those, you simply make a motion to rearrange the agenda to take it off the consent agenda, and it'll be handled separately. Okay. And if that motion passes, then that's what we do. Okay. Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yeah. Just to make sure I heard you correctly, this is our only council meeting for the month of May.
Correct. Councilmember Garetano.
Yeah, this question might be for Director Vunich. Hearing that our next meeting will be in June, I was just rethinking that Bill 2706 and just want to make sure from Director Vunich's perspective, like, does that change any of the situation regarding that bill since we won't have a meeting till June?
Mr. Vunich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Garitano, obviously it pushes it out approximately 1 month for final passage, but there are a lot of steps in between that Mr. Whalen and the city of Wildwood have to complete, and those can get started in that interim period. Thank you.
Perfect. I just want to make sure that progress can continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Dodwell.
Since we're not having a council meeting during that same week, are we having a economic development meeting, or is that?
All other meeting are not affected by this at all.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments on the miscellaneous? Seeing none, I would take a motion to adjourn. Made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilor Garitano, non-debatable. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so we have to go back into the work session.
That's right. I knew we still had something to do.
And we have just a few items. So resuming, the first one is fencing and permitting requirements you have seen. And I'm going to, if you just will allow me, I'm going to do my best to expedite these because I think, at least with respect to this one, we've had a lot of discussion, or quite a bit of discussion previously. I know it's been in planning and parks. So you've been provided with the memorandum relative to this. It's just the latest one you've been provided with. And so at the end of the day, if there is, this was really brought about in large part by our city attorney's recommendation that we needed to do more, not a lot more, but some, in addition to our fencing regulations, because they are pretty sparse. And fences have a way of causing lots of issues. And once they're built, it can get really bad. So the question before the council is whether you would like to make a motion to have legislation prepared to improve our fencing ordinances, fence ordinances, as indicated in the material you've been provided. Mr. Vinich, is that a fair assessment and summary?
Yes, sir, you did well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rottenberg.
I will make that motion that we proceed.
Okay, we have a motion to proceed, seconded by Councilmember Rambo. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? My apology, Councilmember Edens. I see you back now. I didn't mean to cut you off. So you were in favor of that, is that correct? Councilmember Edens, were you voting in favor of that motion?
Yes.
Perfect. Just want to make sure. Okay. So that motion carries. The legislation will be before the council at its next council meeting. City Attorney Young?
Joe, would any of these need to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission first because they affect zoning district regulations?
That's correct, Mr. Young. We need to process this through the Planning and Zoning Commission and get it back to City Council as quick as we can.
Okay, perfect. Next, release of escrow relative to Black Bear Ridge. Mr. Vinich, anything? Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I would request that any discussion on this be postponed. I'd like to discuss some of the components with Mr. Cross in greater detail.
Okay, that's fine. Is there a motion to postpone? Would you like it postponed to the next meeting or indefinitely?
Indefinitely at this time. Certainly, we can bring it back if something were to change. Thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to postpone item 5C1 release of escrow relative to Black Bear Ridge indefinitely? In this concerns Ward 6, made by Councilmember Jaxie, seconded by Councilmember Rambo. Any discussion on the motion? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. That takes us to the 4 receipt and files we have. Mr. Vinich, the first is PZ 1699. Anything you want to mention relative to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, this is an extension for 1 year of a conditional use permit for a telecommunications tower. As with any action by Planning and Zoning Commission, the City Council has the authority to exercise power of review. That review would have to be exercised tonight with the receipt and filing of this report. The Planning and Zoning did support the extension, given the role that tower plays in providing good telecommunication services in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Joe on PZ 16-99 or any motion, any action relative to review? All right, seeing none. Next, PZ 5-21, Mr. Vinich.
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just an update on the tree preservation and restoration code to let you know we haven't forgotten about it. And this summer, we'll spend a great deal of time with the Planning and Zoning Commission working on it. If there are any questions, the department would be glad to try to answer them at this time.
Any questions for Joe or any comments from any member of the council? Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, I have a very quick suggestion. First of all, this is music to my ears, as everyone knows. It's long overdue, and I was very grateful to see the depth and the detail in this in the memorandum that the department put together. So everyone should really appreciate that. I do have one suggestion. We have a document that I could have written from our captive arborist in the back that says every complaint that I've been making about the tree code. I'm hoping that we have some sort of independent expert to do the plantings guide, et cetera, rather than relying on landscape architect or architects. We should probably have someone who is more oriented toward the habitat restoration and the invasive species removal and those kinds of things that are mentioned in the memorandum. MDC has some resources, but they're stretched pretty thin. And so hopefully you can do something with that, Joe.
Thank you. So noted. Moving next, any further comments or questions? All right, seeing none, moving next to St. Louis County PC 39-94, the Grover Company. Mr. Vinich.
Mr. Mayor, thank you again. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, this is a receipt and file just to advise you that Lucky Dog Central on Manchester Road in the heart of Grover is expanding their parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Joe or comments? All right, seeing none, last PZ 9-20, New Singular Wireless PSC, LLC, DBA AT&T Wireless. Mr. Vinich.
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, this is a new conditional use permit that was granted by the Planning and Zoning Commission for a 190-foot tall telecommunications tower of a monopole design. It will be in close proximity to the above ground or elevated water storage tank at Old Etherton Road and Route 109. The Planning and Zoning Commission was faced with a paradox in that the federal government and the state government have limited the municipal authorities relative to these types of uses. And from that perspective, I believe the Planning and Zoning Commission did an excellent job of working with what they were given to provide excellent screening of the equipment shelter area and to blend the monopole with the above ground elevated storage, water storage tank, and tried to make the best of this situation. Again, as with any conditional use permit, the City Council has 15 days to exercise its power review over the decision and action of the commission. And so again, tonight, with no meeting at the end of May, that exercise of power review would have to occur at this meeting. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Vinich? One thing I just want to mention, we discussed this at Planning and Zoning Commission, and I believe our city attorneys apprised us all of this previously, but unfortunately, given recent Missouri statutory changes, the city, and not just Wildwood, but all municipalities, our hands are really tied relative to imposing any kind of condition on these. I mean, personally, I've advocated historically for disguising these. I mean, I'm certainly all about, communication, advancing that, and so forth, but you can do that with nominal, in a better way, in my opinion, by having something that blends to the topography. And unfortunately, we're just not able to do that anymore in the state of Missouri. And those are my 2 cents on that. Okay. Any further questions relative to this item for Joe? All right. I believe that takes us to the end of the work session. I want to thank each of you for all of your work this evening. We've covered a lot of material with the hearings and everything. So anything else for the good of the order before motion to adjourn the work session is made? All right, seeing none, I would ask for a motion to adjourn the work session of the City Council. Maybe Councilmember Bros, second by Councilmember Jaxie. Non-debatable motion. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?